Chapter 1400. To put it bluntly, the backyard of the Qian family was just a small farmyard. There were 3 thatched cottages. Although the thatched cottages were incompatible with the splendor of the front yard, the interior was quite comfortable and elegant. The old lady sat on the bed and kept telling Zhang Feng about Qian Wanli's childhood, as well as listening to Zhang Feng's anecdotes about the academy on the mountain. Zhang Feng even personally made a dessert for the old lady. This time, the old lady was so happy that she kissed Zhang Feng's face again and again. After a while, the old lady said, "Wanli, why do I feel that you have something on your mind?" Zhang Feng was shocked and hurriedly said, "Grandma, I don't. You can't hide it from me. Besides, you are a little different today, but I can't tell what is different. Maybe you are thinking about the teacher and students in the front yard?" The old lady sighed with some annoyance and said, "That's right. How can an old lady like me let you accompany me all the time? It is more important for you to accompany the guests. In the future, come back to see me more often. By the way, this dessert, when did you learn how to make it?" Zhang Feng was shocked when he heard this. He didn't think about this matter, so he had to talk nonsense. "Grandma, this is what the dean made for me when I was on the mountain. I memorized it and made it for the first time today. Hee, my grandson has made a name for himself. Later, I will find a marriage for you. She is from my family. I heard that although she is only 15 years old, she is not much worse than the concubines in the palace. I also heard from your great-aunt a few days ago that there were officials who came several times and wanted your cousin to go to the palace. But I stopped them." The old lady said excitedly, "How can I give such a good granddaughter-in-law to others? We are all family, of course we have to." "Grandma." Zhang Feng was ashamed, and he felt even more uncomfortable in his heart. He hurriedly interrupted the old lady. "Grandma, the teacher said that a man should put his studies first. The dean also said that 3 years later, I will definitely be a Xianxia. That's why your grandson wants to wait until we've brought glory to our family before sitting down and waiting." When the old lady heard this, her eyes narrowed into slits. After a while, under the old lady's guidance, Zhang Feng pried open a loose stone. The old lady fumbled around and took out a palm-sized wooden box. She carefully opened it and said, "Wanli, this thing is a keepsake from when your grandfather and I first met when we were young. Rumor has it that it's an antique that has been passed down for hundreds of years. It's also a family heirloom of our Qian family. You also know what your father does, so I've never been willing to take it out. I've been thinking of giving it to you when you become successful and get married. But after hearing what you said, Grandma's memory is getting worse day by day. So, Grandma wants to give it to you now. I'm just afraid that we won't be able to wait for that day. That would be troublesome." This was an antique. Although Zhang Feng didn't know much about jade, this piece of jade that was as white as sugar and as transparent as glass was still shocking. This was definitely an antique, but the guilt in his heart was even more indescribable. "Grandma, are you confused again? You're in such good health. You'll definitely wait until your grandson gets married. Moreover, your grandson wants you to hold your great-grandson." "Really?" The old lady smiled even more kindly. She grabbed Zhang Feng's hand and leaned on Zhang Feng's cheek. She talked about Qian Wanli's childhood until the old lady fell into a deep sleep. Seeing this, Zhang Feng heaved a deep sigh of relief. He put the jade in the old lady's hand and covered her with a quilt. Then he walked out of the room quietly. He looked at the farm tools in the yard. Zhang Feng couldn't help but feel a little frustrated. Today, he wanted to avenge Qian Wanli. Although it was said to be impulsive, this was what he wanted to do. He wanted to tell the world that he, Zhang Feng's people, even if the heavenly king Lao Tzu came, he couldn't touch them. He really didn't dare to bear this kind of life and death parting. Leaning against a stone roller, Zhang Feng lit a cigarette and pondered. And at this moment, suddenly, a stone was thrown from a thatched cottage towards Zhang Feng. However, it didn't hit him. Instead, it fell beside Zhang Feng's feet. But this time, it scared Zhang Feng half to death. He hurriedly took out the tri-edge bayonet and was on guard. He remembered. The entire Qian mansion, as well as the surroundings of the Qian mansion, should have been sorted out by old Ma and the others. What was this situation? Could it be? Was there an assassin hiding in this place? Zhang Feng didn't dare to talk nonsense, but he also didn't dare to make a move. He didn't practice martial arts. At this time he was already in a panic. But it was to the extent that Zhang Feng didn't have an instinctive reaction. He also wanted to see who could avoid the detection of old Ma and the others. Zhang Feng waited for a moment. He only heard some rustling sounds, but he didn't feel any danger. Then he gathered his courage and slowly stood up to look at the place where the sound came from. However, when Zhang Feng stood up, instantly he was dumbfounded by the scene that he saw. Almost at the same time, Zhang Feng and the person opposite him asked in unison, "Who are you?" Chapter 1401. Not far in front of Zhang Feng, next to the sheep shed, a young man in tattered clothes was weaving straw sandals. It seemed like it was his first time seeing a stranger and he was a little scared. The young man looked similar to Qian Wanli, but he looked a little silly. This made Zhang Feng a little confused. What was going on? Zhang Feng asked carefully, "Who are you?" The young man saw the strange thing in Zhang Feng's hand and bit his finger suspiciously. "Are you a bad person?" Zhang Feng was stunned. "I'm not." The young man nodded and continued weaving straw sandals. Zhang Feng gathered his courage and approached the young man, but the young man didn't mind. Zhang Feng sat beside the young man and watched him weave straw sandals. He asked curiously, "Everyone went to the front yard. Why are you here?" "Grandma said that I should live here. The people in front are too fierce and always like to bully me. It's good here. With Grandma here, I can eat my fill." Zhang Feng asked curiously, "What's your name?" "My name is String." "String?" Zhang Feng was a little confused. He asked suspiciously, "Your surname is Qian? You even know this? Did Qian tell you?" "Right, I just heard from Grandma that Qian is bringing his teacher to the mansion today." "Are you Qian's teacher?" Zhang Feng was a little confused. "You said Qian Wanli is called Xianxia?" The young man nodded and said, "Yes, but Qian hasn't been called this name for a long time. Grandma told me." "Qian Tong. China? What kind of name is this? What kind of name is this? It's really a weirdo." The name Qian aroused Zhang Feng's interest. He asked, "Qian, are you Qian Wanli's little brother? But why haven't I heard him mention it before?" When Xianxia heard this, she stomped her legs on the ground in grievance and said, "I had always been outside with Mother. 2 years ago, Father sent someone to bring me back and said that Mother went somewhere else. But Father couldn't lie to me. Mother had always been lying there. She couldn't bear to eat the food I gave her." Zhang Feng's eyes stung. He chatted with Xianxia in detail. Only then did he understand everything about this kid. Xian was the child Qian Tong had with a woman from Tongzhou when he was out doing business, but he had always been opposed by his family, especially by Qian Tong's sisters. It was also because of that incident that Zhang Feng had almost no contact with his sisters, and this time, Zhang Feng could basically imagine that it was all for the sake of money. The heavens would not give a person a surname for nothing. This was also the reason why the Qian family loved money so much. On one hand, it was because of the county baron title. On the other hand, the most important thing was that Zhang Feng had heard it before he entered the door. It was all to get benefits from him. As for Xian's mother, before she fell seriously ill, she sent a message to Qian Tong, but by the time Qian Tong arrived, Xian's mother had already been dead for a long time. There was nothing he could do. In addition, Xian's mother had been careful. She had asked a merchant in Chang and who knew Qian Tong to pass the message. If Qian Tong didn't go, then Qian Tong would definitely bear the infamy of being ungrateful and abandoning his wife and child. So Qian Tong had no choice but to take Xian back to the house. If it weren't for Xian's mental retardation, the old lady would have definitely added him to the family tree. However, this child was born somewhat mentally retarded, and even the soft-hearted old lady had a headache. Let him go. This was the Qian house, and the Qian family was considered a famous family in Cheng. Moreover, those children always bullied him. Even the servants liked to bully him. With no other choice, Xian moved to the old lady's house and relied on her for survival. This courtyard originally didn't have any sheep, but Xian desperately wanted the sheep, so Qian Tong got a sheep to accompany Xianxia. Zhang Feng curiously asked, Xian, what do you want a sheep for? Also, why are you making these straw sandals? Xianxia mysteriously smiled and said, You don't know, right? Our sheep will be able to give birth to a litter of lambs in half a month, and one lamb can be sold for 10 strings of coins. If they grow up, one lamb can be sold for 30 strings of coins. Take a guess, if I raise a large flock of sheep, how much can I sell them for? Zhang Feng was a little surprised. He pointed at the straw sandals and asked, Then why are you making these straw sandals? To exchange for fodder. A lot of brothers don't have any shoes to wear. Moreover, last time when the sheep were in heat, I asked them to help me steal the sheep next door, so I have to help them. Besides, these sandals aren't for free. They promised to cut grass for my sheep. A pair of sandals and a basket of grass. Isn't it worth it? Zhang Feng was shocked. He couldn't help but pinch his thigh. God, this joke of yours is really too big. This is a talent bestowed by the heavens. Is this the so-called, when the heavens close a door, they will open a window for you? Chapter 1402. In the eyes of the world, Xianxia was a bit of a fool. But this was all on the surface. This was because this child had been isolated from the world since he was a child, coupled with the fact that he lacked fatherly love since he was a child, and in this era, this kind of child was the most despised by the world. Because he was casual, he closed himself off. What he showed was not because he ate something, but because he was mentally immature. If such a person was properly trained, in less than 10 years, he would definitely be a blockbuster to the world. Because he longed for recognition and love. In later society, this kind of personality was called autism. What Xianxia had unintentionally displayed in front of Qian Tong was simply to gain Qian Tong's approval. After all, his father was a person who played with money. This was the best way to get Qian Tong's approval, but Qian Tong seemed to have labeled Xianxia as a fool from the beginning. So, thinking of this, Zhang Feng subconsciously asked, Xiang, let me ask you something. Xianxia asked indifferently, Is it about Guan? No, let me ask you, if you had 3 white sheep, how much could you sell them for? Xianxia looked at Zhang Feng suspiciously and asked, If I had 300 sheep, why would I sell them? Zhang Feng was stunned. He asked, I'm just asking, tell me, what do you think? Xianxia heard this and said, If it was me, I would only choose the best and strongest sheep among these 300 sheep. Even if there were only 50 sheep, I would still have 300 sheep next year. As for the remaining 250 sheep, I would sell their sheepskin to the Hu merchants. I heard my mother say that a sheepskin sold for 20 copper coins. When the time comes, I will rent a butcher's shop in Cheng. I will sell 1 jin of meat for 5 copper coins. Even if there is only 30 jin of meat in a lamb, I can sell it for 150 copper coins. If there are 250 sheep, I can sell them for 37,000 copper coins. Including the bones and offal, I can sell the lamb for 40,000 copper coins, which is 40 taels of silver. If 1 piece of sheepskin is worth 20 copper coins, 250 pieces of sheepskin can be sold for 5,000 copper coins. And this is only in Cheng. If I were to go to the Tufan Turks, the price would be even higher. When talking about this, Xianxia was abnormally excited. It was as if at this time, in front of him was not a field of grass, but a field of silver coins. This made Zhang Feng even more curious and asked, Xiang, who did you learn this from before? Qian Chuaner looked at Zhang Feng suspiciously and said, Do we still need to learn this? This time, Zhang Feng was stumped. At this time, Zhang Feng wished that he could drag Li Gan and the other idiots here and let them see what kind of prodigy this was. Compared to Xianxia, what the hell was Li Gan? What the hell was Du Debing? Those were all trash. This was simply a natural-born fortune-teller and a natural-born merchant god. After losing Qian Wanli, Zhang Feng felt very guilty. This was because as a brother, he had always wanted to help the Qian family, but he could not find a way. But now, seeing Xianxia like this, Zhang Feng could not help but have a bold idea. Xiang, don't you want to go somewhere with me first? There are many brothers at my place, and there are many, many delicious and fun things. Xianxia shook his head and rejected Zhang Feng without thinking. This was somewhat unexpected to Zhang Feng. Prince Zhang, President Zhang? At this time, Qian Tong's low voice sounded at the door of the small courtyard. It interrupted Zhang Feng's thoughts. Zhang Feng shook his head helplessly and glanced at Xianxia. The moment Xianxia heard this voice, his eyes flashed with excitement, but a moment later, it dimmed down. Zhang Feng's heart ached. Don't you want to see your father? Xianxia shook his head fiercely. Father said that I'm not allowed to go out of the courtyard. After saying that, Xianxia lowered his head in grievance, not daring to look at Zhang Feng. Seeing this, Zhang Feng shook his head, stood up, and walked towards the courtyard door. As soon as he saw Zhang Feng, Qian Tong was instantly relieved. But when he saw Zhang Feng coming from that direction, he could not help but worry. President Zhang, how could you stoop to such a desolate place? This old man was rude. Uncle, what are you doing? Zhang Feng hurriedly helped Qian Tong up. As the two walked towards the front yard, they discussed the next steps. Zhang Feng said, Uncle, the matter of Wanli is still my academy's fault. I also heard that the Ministry of Justice will send some of the Tang family's wealth to you soon. After the Ministry of Justice checks the properties of the 4 families, someone will send them to you, but, while speaking, the two paused. Zhang Feng said, the academy is, after all, just the academy. I don't want to take care of other things right now. I'll leave them to Lao Li and the others. When the time comes, I'll send someone to personally talk about the future of the white paper business. I've decided before Wan Li's business will still be handled by your Qian family, President Zhang. Qian Tong knelt down in front of Zhang Feng and sighed. President Zhang, my Qian family is unable to repay the kindness you have shown to my Qian family. Now that Wan Li's revenge has been avenged and we've given you enough, if you continue to give this old man more, I'm afraid you'll remember it. Zhang Feng helped Qian Tong up from the ground. Qian Tong was right. After thinking about it for a while, Yang Kai gave up. Fine, since Uncle says so, I'll drop the matter. But there's something I want to ask Uncle, is that Xianxia in the backyard your young master? Qian Tong naturally knew that Zhang Feng and Xianxia had met for the new year and was shocked. I frightened Dean. My unfilial son was born stupid, I hope sir can forgive him. Zhang Feng said, no, I mean, I want to accept him as my direct disciple. Chapter 1403. Qian Tong was stunned and hurriedly asked, Dean, what did you say? Zhang Feng patted Qian Tong on the shoulder and said, giving a man a fish is not as good as teaching him to fish. I have been thinking about how to compensate you, and Brother Wan Li, coupled with the fact that old madam is so good to me, I was deeply moved. Before seeing Xianxia, I really didn't know what to give you, but after seeing Xianxia, I made up my mind to accept Xianxia as my successor. What do you think? Qian Tong was stunned. He hastily turned pale with fright and said, Sir Dean, I know that you are affectionate and loyal to my family's Wan Li. You are a rare man who values affection and loyalty. If it weren't for you today, Wan Li's hatred wouldn't have been avenged. But now, Wan Li's hatred has been avenged. In addition, I now have a noble title. This old man is perfectly satisfied. How can I accept Sir Dean's kindness? If this were to spread, how would the world view me, Qian Tong? The world will say that I, Qian Tong, took the opportunity to extort Dean, and I will be despised by the world. Moreover, I know my son's temperament. He is so stupid if he were to follow Dean then, no. This absolutely cannot happen. It wasn't that he didn't want Xianxia to take over his mantle. After all, at this time, Qian Wanli, the only hope of the Qian family, was gone, and Xianxia was the only son of the Qian family. Qian Tong naturally hoped that Xianxia could achieve great things. However, Xianxia had suffered the pain of losing his mother in Tang province and had been ridiculed and ostracized since childhood. Under these two conditions, he had become completely stupid. Even the famous doctors in Chang and city had no way to cure him. This was a brain disease. Moreover, how could Xianxia understand the ways of merchants? This was undoubtedly Zhang Feng trying to comfort him. Therefore, Qian Tong would never agree. If he agreed, then how would the world view his Qian clan? How would he, Qian Tong, face the people of Chang and city in the future? When Zhang Feng saw this, he knew Qian Tong would say this, so he sighed and said, "Martial uncle, don't worry, today is not the time to talk about this, but you also know that I have a lot of things to do, plus today's incident, I may not be able to leave the mountain for a long time. However, I also see the dispute in Uncle's family today, and I sincerely want to help Uncle, but money will only bring disaster to disaster Uncle." As for Qianxiang's words, I sincerely want to accept it. If you don't believe me, let's ask Qianxiang's and have him calculate the accounts. Qian Tong, you know he's. I previously believed that Wanli would have a brilliant future in the field of merchants, but after seeing Qianxiang, I'm even more certain that within 10 years, Qianxiang will be unmatched in the art of merchants in my great Tang, no, even in the borders of my great Tang. How could Qian Tong have known that Zhang Feng would give Qianxiang, a child he had almost forgotten, such a high evaluation? Now that he saw Zhang Feng again and saw how sincere he was, Qian Tong felt even more complicated. Looking into Zhang Feng's eyes, Qian Tong asked seriously, "President Zhang, is what you said true?" Zhang Feng pointed to the backyard and said, "Why don't Uncle Qian call Qianxiang over? Let's go." Since Qian Wanli went to the academy, Qian Tong had basically never stopped inquiring about Zhang Feng. From Qian Wanli's mouth, Qian Tong learned that even Li Gan and Du Debing, the smartest people in the academy, had never received such a high evaluation from Zhang Feng. Before this, Qian Tong had wondered what kind of person Zhang Feng considered a genius. So today, when he learned that Zhang Feng actually had such a high evaluation of his stupid son, how could he believe it? The two hurried back to the small courtyard. Qianxiang naturally noticed Qian Tong's arrival and hurriedly hid behind the sheep house, secretly watching the two. Seeing this, Qian Tong immediately shouted angrily, "Come out, come out!" Zhang Feng hurriedly stopped him. "Uncle, don't do this, you'll scare him." Qian Tong hurriedly said, "Dean, how could my son receive such treatment from you?" Zhang Feng ignored him and instead waved to Qianxiang, "Xiang, come to Big Brother's side." Qianxiang was still a little frightened and didn't dare to move. Seeing Qian Tong about to get angry again, Zhang Feng quickly squatted down and said, "Xiang, tell your father about the 300 sheep your big brother just told you about. Wait for Big Brother to take you to eat something delicious." Something delicious? Hearing this, Qianxiang's eyes lit up, but after glancing at Qian Tong, he shrank back. Qian Tong said with some resentment, "The dean told you to speak, so just speak. Father won't scold you." Seeing this, Qianxiang slowly let down her guard. She fearfully told Zhang Feng about what she had just said, as well as the plan that she hadn't finished talking about. This time, Qian Tong was dumbfounded. He seriously doubted that the timid boy standing next to him at this time was still his stupid son. After a long time, Zhang Feng asked, "Uncle, now you know Xiang's ability, right? But after all no buts. You should know that in addition to merchant skills and teaching, I, Zhang Feng, also know some medical skills. What's more, Divine Doctor's son is also on my mountain. If you don't believe me, do you not believe in Divine Doctor's son?" Chapter 1404. After Zhang Feng dealt with the affairs of the Qian mansion, then he hurried back to the academy with Qianxiang, Ma Zhou and the others. The moment they went out, the gate of Chang and city was locked. Looking at the brightly lit Chang and city, Zhang Feng waved his hand and said, "Back to the mountain." Since they parted at the gate of the Tang mansion, he hadn't seen Li Chengqian, Cheng Chumo and the others. Zhang Feng also knew that although he had taken revenge today, the mess he left behind must be cleaned up by someone. So he didn't think much about it. Along the way, Gao Can was on alert all over the city. No one knew where he got a sky piercer in his hand. Coupled with his hoarse and burly figure, he looked like a general. Behind Gao Can, a group of people also followed Zhang Feng's carriage and went up the mountain. Although no one said a word along the way, everyone's eyes were rather strange. The reason was that ever since they left the Qian manor, Zhang Feng's side was always followed by a timid, skinny, and tanned young man. This boy looked a bit like Qian Wanli. But no matter how people asked, he seemed to be frightened. He clutched Zhang Feng's robe tightly and hid behind Zhang Feng without saying a word. And Zhang Feng didn't explain much. After all, it was useless to explain anything now. And Zhang Feng was also thinking hard about the next countermeasures and the way to go in the future. Such a big thing happened today, but the big hand behind the Tang family still didn't come out. Even the people of the Wang clan didn't have much reaction, let alone the big families behind the Bai family, the Gao family, and the Mi family. It seemed that they didn't know anything about what happened today, and it had nothing to do with them. But the more it was like this, the more Zhang Feng felt that things were a bit tricky. At this time, no one came out to say a word of justice for the four families. What did it mean? It meant that they had already thought of all the consequences. That was to say, they had already thought of the countermeasures for all the consequences of what they did today. This was the scariest part. They had been planning from the beginning. What were they planning? Phosphate fertilizer? This thing was just an excuse to deceive the world. This thing was bound to be implemented in large quantities, and whoever dared to stop it would be defying the decree and becoming the enemy of all the people in the world. No one dared to do such a thing. Then, what were these people planning? This was what Zhang Feng didn't understand the most. It was said that this was the best time to deal with him. The reason why Zhang Feng dared to come to the Qian residence was because he wanted to use himself as bait to see if these people would take the bait. However, the result disappointed him. These people still didn't move. Then what exactly were they plotting? Medical skills? Steel smelting? Or was it his business path technique? The reason why Zhang Feng thought of the business skills was mainly because of Qian Wanli's death. If Qian Wanli wasn't dead, Zhang Feng wouldn't think too much. But Qian Wanli was dead. That meant that the key now was to find out whether Qian Wanli was killed by accident or deliberately set up. This was the breakthrough point. There was also the Mi family. Why would Granny Miji let all the important people in the family die before he went? As long as someone confessed, the Mi family wouldn't die. But everything was buts. At this moment, it was like a huge mountain pressing down on Zhang Feng, making it hard for him to breathe. However, there was one thing that Zhang Feng knew. What he did today would definitely serve as a warning. Those who wanted to kill him or coveted Pyrolite Mountain would definitely not dare to come here again. The following dangers would definitely be more dangerous. This time, all his plans, from firearms to crossbows to composite bows to armor, had to be sped up. Zhang Feng also thought of an even more important point. That was the little idea he had in mind before. Now it was time to arrange it. That was to form a special battle team. When he thought of this, Zhang Feng lifted the curtain and was about to call Old Ma to ask him. But before he opened his mouth, he heard Old Ma say, "Dean, we've arrived at the academy." With this, Zhang Feng realized that they had unknowingly arrived at the entrance of White Deer College. At the entrance of the academy, Yu Shernan and the others were already holding lanterns and torches, waiting with all the students of the academy. The light of the torches lit up the entire Mount E red. Turning around, it was the same in the marketplace at the foot of the mountain. All the merchants, as well as the Hu merchants, seemed to spontaneously hold up their torches and stood on both sides of the dark road. At this moment, Zhang Feng slowly lifted the curtain of the carriage. When the crowd saw Zhang Feng, they heaved a long sigh of relief. "The Dean is back." "Welcome back, Dean." "Welcome back, Dean." Excited and loud roars exploded on Mount E like thunder. Even the soldiers guarding the city on the top floor of Chang and City could faintly hear them. Chapter 1405. Reporting. Your Majesty, President Zhang and the others have safely returned to the academy. In the Imperial Study. Xiao Gizi's report instantly caused the stifling atmosphere in the Imperial Study to slowly recover some of its warmth. Li Shimon's cracked lips opened slightly. "Did you notice anything unusual along the way?" "Nothing at the moment. The branches of the big families in Chang and in near Chang and are under constant surveillance by the Imperial Guards. There is nothing unusual with these people at the moment." "Leave." Li Shimon waved his hand. Xiao Gizi hurriedly left. After Xiao Gizi left, Li Shimin looked around and asked Qing Yaojin, Wei Zheng and the others, "What time is it now?" "Your Majesty, it is now Su Shi." Li Shimin nodded and looked at Zhang Sun Wuji. "The Ministry of Justice, haven't you gotten anything out of the interrogation?" Zhang Sun Wuji's face tightened. "There is no news yet. Lord Li is personally in charge of the Ministry of Justice. I believe there should be no problems." Li Shimin heard and sighed. Such a big thing happened to the four families, but you didn't know anything beforehand. You should be punished. Hearing this, Wei Jing Yuqigong and the others hurriedly got up and knelt. "We are guilty." Li Shimin continued, "Qian Wanli's matter is small, and this was an accident. But have you ever thought that the one who died today was not Qian Wanli, but us, or your children? What would you think?" Yuqigong, Niu Jinda, and Cheng Yaojin were shocked and hurriedly said, "Your Majesty, it is our fault enough." Li Shimin waved his hand and said, "Let the crown prince in." Outside the imperial study, Li Chengqian and the others were all kneeling neatly. Hearing this, Li Chengqian's face changed, but he hurriedly bowed and entered the imperial study. Once inside, Li Shimin glanced at Li Chengqian and said, "I remember that the tea house in the East City is your property, right? Also, you have a group of spies in Chang and City who are responsible for collecting information and spreading rumors. What do you think of this matter?" Li Chengqian's face changed instantly and he hurriedly said, "Father, I was careless. But I've been busy with the phosphate fertilizer on the mountain during this period of time and forgot about it. Please punish me, Father." "Wait, go to the Ministry of Justice to receive your punishment." Li Shimin waved his hand. "What do you think of this matter? Did your people gather any useful information today?" "Yes, but they are all kneeling outside Taiji Palace." "Announce it." As his voice fell, little Gizi hurriedly announced the decree. A moment later, more than 10 people of different ages and sizes appeared at the door of the imperial study, trembling. Looking at the people kneeling in the imperial study, they couldn't help but panic. "Greetings, Your Majesty." More than 10 people knelt down as soon as they entered the door. Li Shimin waved his hand in annoyance. Xiao Gizi understood and said, "Tell His Majesty everything you found out today. Don't hide anything." "How dare they hide it?" The people kneeling outside the imperial study were people who could make the entire Tang dynasty tremble with a stomp of their feet. Who were they? How dare they hide anything? They didn't want to live anymore. "Your Majesty, today in Changhui, how could they dare to hide anything? He even told her what time he was going to shit, what time he was going to eat, and what he was going to eat. But there was nothing useful about the abnormality." This made Li Shimin's expression turn slightly cold. "Your Majesty, when I came to the palace today, I saw a blacksmith shop that hadn't been opened for a long time open today. Does this count?" Li Shimin, who was already a little disappointed, heard this, and his eyes instantly lit up. He asked, "Which blacksmith shop are you talking about? Tell me the whole story." Seeing this, the man hurriedly said, "Your Majesty, earlier today, this lowly one ate fermented glutinous rice at the entrance of the blacksmith shop, but I didn't see anyone. However, when this lowly one passed by the blacksmith shop at the entrance of the gourd alley in Xinghua Square, this lowly one found that it was already open for business. Many people were inside organizing something, and there were also people carrying large amounts of ironware in and out of the shop. This shop originally belonged to a person surnamed Zhou, but I didn't see the shopkeeper today." "Surnamed Zhou?" Li Shimin frowned slightly. At this time, another spy hurriedly said, "Your Majesty, I know this blacksmith shop. My brother worked here for a short time before. I heard that the shopkeeper's wife seemed to be surnamed Wang, and I heard that the shopkeeper's wife's accent was from the direction of Taiwan. Taiwan accent? Surnamed Wang. The shop that hadn't opened for a long time actually opened. What did this mean? This meant that there was a big problem." Li Shimin waved his hand and said, "Send an order to thoroughly investigate this matter. There can be no mistakes." Hearing this, everyone hurriedly knelt down and said, "Yes, Your Majesty." Chapter 1406. After everyone exited the imperial study, Li Shimin stopped Fang Xianling. After everyone had left, he walked to the bedchamber and asked, "Master Fang, Do you know if there's any news from Mount Longsho? Your Majesty, there's no news for the time being. Does Your Majesty suspect that the people who went to Mount Longsho have found the ore? Li Shimin nodded. That's possible. Otherwise, why would the Wang family choose this time to restore the iron mine? Li Shimin stamped his feet and said, Little Gizi, immediately send someone from the Minister of Internal Affairs to ask if the iron mine in Chang and has been restored, and if there's still coal. Yes, Your Majesty. Li Shimin didn't leave. Instead, he called Wei Zheng and the others back to the imperial study. As soon as they entered, Li Shimin asked, Yu Qigong, did the people you sent to Mount Longsho have any news? Yu Qigong shook his head and said, But we haven't returned home for the time being. Does Your Majesty think that the iron mine on Mount Longsho has been found? Li Shimin nodded. That's right. Otherwise, there really isn't such a coincidence in this world. You all just heard that the Wang family actually reopened the ironware shop that had been closed for half a month. Moreover, it wasn't as good as yesterday, not tomorrow. Why must it be today? With this question, Yu Qigong and the others instantly sensed the problem. Why today? Why not tomorrow? Was it a coincidence? Or was it premeditated? In an instant, the imperial study fell into silence once again. Groups of palace maids were trembling in fear as they poured sweet tea for the few of them. Occasionally, they would bring in boxes of cigarettes. The imperial study was once again shrouded in fog. Cheng Chumo and the others escaped from the palace as if they were running for their lives. After they left the palace gate, they breathed a deep sigh of relief. Just now, they had knelt for more than 2 hours and almost lost their knees. But in the end, they didn't know if the emperor forgot or what, but he didn't punish them. It would be strange if they didn't run. Once they left the palace, they couldn't help but be stunned. After looking at each other, Wei Xiu asked, Are we going back to the mountain or going home separately? Why don't we go back to the mountain? Right now, none of our family members have left the palace. Who knows what happened? If we don't run now, we will inevitably become a punching bag when we return. Cheng Chumo agreed, yes. Although the insect's words are a bit harsh, it makes sense. Besides, Fengzi made such a big noise at the foot of the mountain today, so he must be very angry now. If we go up and accompany Fengzi, we will be disobeying the emperor's order. Everyone basically hit it off, and then hurriedly rushed out of the city. Other people might not be able to leave the city at this time, but who were they? They were the sons of the Duke and had the Academy's token to enter and exit the city. As long as they had the token, they would turn a blind eye and let them out of the city as long as there were no major incidents. The moment they hit it off and hurriedly ran away, a team of Jinwu guards in golden armor rushed out of the palace. Then they scattered and rushed to the mansions of the Duke. Teams of imperial guards shuttling between Chang and city and the imperial city were still like hawks shuttling back and forth in Chang and city. This kind of thing didn't stop until it was almost midnight. But just as the clock was about to ring, the clock was ticking. At the Tonghua gate of Chang, a rider holding a torch galloped over. When the guard on the city gate was about to speak, the rider on the horse shouted, Open the gate quickly. Good news, good news. On the mountain, in Zhang Feng's villa, Zhang Yuyao and Jing Shu stopped crying when Zhang Feng came back, and then went to the room on the second floor. In the living room on the first floor. At this time, a group of big shots on the mountain gathered together. Although the old village chief and he had already explained the matter clearly, Scholar Lai and the others still asked Zhang Feng to explain the matter again. Everyone furrowed their brows and slowly walked away. But when they reached the door, Scholar Lai noticed Xianxia huddled in the corner of the door and asked, Fengzi, his name is Xianxia, Qian Wanli's half-brother. Xiang, come and greet your teacher. Zhang Feng hurriedly introduced. However, everyone was also stunned by this name. It took them a long time to react, but when they saw Xianxia's timid expression, they thought that he was frightened today. Moreover, they were too lazy to ask about the person Zhang Feng brought back. After all, this mountain belonged to Zhang Feng. How could they ask about it? They were too lazy to ask. After such a big thing happened today, they had been tense and wanted to rest early. After all, The results would only be out tomorrow. After the few of them left, Zhang Feng immediately called Old Ma in and asked seriously, "Old Ma, you saw what happened today. I want to get a special force. Go back and pick a few smart people for me." Old Ma was stunned and asked, "What soldiers are you talking about? You want to raise a private army?" No, it's a special force. It's similar to the security guards on the mountain. But they're just there to learn the new military tactics and fighting methods that I came up with. But the prerequisite is that they have to be young. Chapter 1407. It was not the first time that Zhang Feng had such an idea. He had had such an idea a long time ago, but because of some things, he had not decided until now. Until today, Zhang Feng was really sure. Today, the mastermind behind the scenes did not make a move, which meant that there would be a bigger move. This was what Zhang Feng was most worried about. After all, if this bastard really did something, it would be really troublesome. Zhang Feng was not afraid of trouble, but he was also afraid of being annoyed. Instead of waiting for others to come, why not take the initiative himself, Zhang Feng? Take the initiative to lure the mastermind out? However, Old Ma did not know this, nor did he know the meaning of special forces. He quickly asked, "Dean, what do you mean by special forces? What's the use of it?" Zhang Feng knew that Old Ma would ask this, so he said, "In fact, special forces are also a kind of soldier. This kind of soldier actually has the ability to fight together and has quick reaction. However, in the case of an individual soldier, they can also complete a 1,000-mile raid alone or scout the enemy camp at night. This kind of soldier has very strict requirements for the soldier's physical fitness and endurance. As for tactics and fighting, I don't know much about these, so I'll have to rely on you. However, it's best to have some foundation." Old Ma was instantly in a dilemma. "Dean, these people you mentioned can be found in the military camp, but if you look for retired veterans, it's really, based on the current manpower in the academy and the public house, we can gather at most 30 people. However, if you look for people who were screened out by the military due to some things, this is not a problem. However, don't get your hopes up. It's not easy to find such people." Zhang Feng raised his eyebrows and asked, "Are there very few people like this?" "Not very few, but none at all. Most of the people who came out of the military, as long as they are good and not disabled, have gone to those rich businessmen's houses to guard the house. How many of the remaining people do you think are good enough?" Zhang Feng had really forgotten about this. Although ordinary people hated military personnel, to the rich and influential families, such people were the most suitable to be guards. Thinking of this, Zhang Feng suddenly thought of Old Niu. Didn't this batch of people instigate a few hundred guards and servants when they were in Lantian? Presumably, the people who were chosen by them were all experts, right? Moreover, he had promised Xianxia and the others that he would forge the 4 of them. Now, it seemed that it was time. "Old Ma, let's not consider your men for now. Let me ask you, what do you think of Iron Bull, Idiot Wei, Sun Chong, the Yubaolin brothers, and Gao Ken?" Speaking of which, Old Ma also remembered these little fellows. His eyes couldn't help but light up as he said, "If these fellows were in the army, they would definitely be fierce generals. Could it be that you want to?" Zhang Feng nodded. Old Ma's expression changed instantly. He asked suspiciously, "Dean, you really don't know Tai Niu's identity?" Zhang Feng was stunned and asked, "What other identities do they have?" When Old Ma saw Zhang Feng's expression, he instantly knew that Zhang Feng still didn't know the real identity of Xianxia and the others. This was easy to handle. If Zhang Feng really knew their identity, then Zhang Feng's arrangement would be problematic. After all, these fellows' fathers, except for Gao Ken, were all high dukes. Letting them do this at this time? If the dean hadn't discussed this with the high dukes in advance, then it would be strange. In fact, in the Chang and military camp, Zhang Feng had already known about the training method that he had come up with. Not to mention training, just hearing about it made his scalp tingle. Carrying dozens of kilograms of stones on their backs every day, they couldn't even sleep well. This was simply the devil's training method. In the Chang and military camp, there were at least 50,000 soldiers stationed there. Those who could stay in the Chang and military camp were basically the elites of the elites. However, There were not even 5,000 people who could pass the training method so far. From this, one could see how terrifying it was. But once they got through this level, it was really like what Zhang Feng had said. It was not a problem for them to be able to fight 10 people at once. Besides, they were not given any tools or food, not even a fire starter, and were asked to fight with the beasts in the Qinling Mountains for 10 days. The person who could come up with such a training manual was either crazy or a god. At first, old Ma Huanzi had lamented that this thing had been created by that perverted general. However, when he found out that this thing had been created by Zhang Feng, he was completely dumbfounded. With Zhang Feng's weak body, how could he come up with such a thing? Now, when Zhang Feng said this, he suddenly understood that this thing was really made by the dean. Was it just for this moment? Old Ma was dizzy listening to this. His mind was still thinking about this matter. After talking for a long time, Zhang Feng found that Old Ma was in a daze. He couldn't help but ask, "Old Ma? Old Ma? Hey, Old Ma, do you want a wife or not?" After hearing the word wife, Old Ma finally reacted. Zhang Feng rubbed his head and said, "You go down the mountain tomorrow morning. Call Jia Daoren up. Those guys are naughty. The two of you will be responsible for their training from now on. Also, find those guys for me tomorrow morning." Seeing that Zhang Feng really intended to train Cheng Chumo and the other young dukes, and that he would train them in the future, Old Ma was so scared that his legs went soft. He hurriedly said, "Okay." Chapter 1408. Early the next morning, Old Ma hurried down the mountain. Last night he thought about it all night. Let's not talk about Wei Shuyu. Wei Shuyu was Prime Minister Wei's son. Although Prime Minister Wei gave people the impression that he was unapproachable, he rarely came to the mountain. This was easy to handle. Lord Zhangsun was also fine. But the most uncomfortable were the two young masters of the Yuchi family and the son of General Cheng. Damn it, they were all famous bastards. Asking him to train them? Wasn't that courting death? Would they be able to endure such hardships? But Zhang Feng had given the order, so he had no choice but to do it. Therefore, Old Ma thought about it for a whole night. When the sky was still dark, Old Ma found all his old buddies and told them about it. When they heard it, their heads instantly exploded. Asking them, a group of nameless soldiers, to train Commandant Cheng? This was not courting death. This was courting death. But they couldn't refuse. In the end, everyone slapped their thighs and agreed that they had to go to the military camp and ask one of the generals first. After all, it was extremely difficult for them to find a few dukes. But the military camp was different. This was General Cheng's territory. Even if they couldn't find him, as long as they found his personal guards, it would be fine. As long as they passed the message as for the consequences, they could completely push it to General Cheng. Not only would they not have any responsibility, after all, Cheng Chumo made a scene at the training ground. That was the civilization and the military. It was also because of this matter that Cheng Chumo and the others were transferred out of the military by the emperor in the military camp. Although the sky was still dark, groups of men were roaring and running around Shao Mountain crazily. What was even more frightening was that everyone's arrowheads, necks, calves, waists, and backs were tied with a large bag of bulging things. No one knew whether they were filled with stones or sand. But no matter which one it was extremely terrifying to Old Ma, who was staring blankly at them. And in Old Ma's eyes, this group of lunatics was shouting without blushing or panting, as if it was an ordinary thing. This made Old Ma feel terrified. Stop. The military camp is an important place. No one is allowed to enter. At this moment, an angry roar sounded. At the next moment, a general wearing radiant armor and riding a large horse came before the old horse. Old Ma hastily took out his identity card and said, "I have been ordered to look for the generals." "What is it?" "The dean wants a few disciples to participate in the training of the new art of war." "I'm here to ask." The general had just asked casually. He hadn't expected Old Ma to say anything. However, he was taken aback by Old Ma's words. "Are you saying that Zhang Feng wants to train his disciples?" "No, it's Iron Bull. It's Tang Yo and the others." Old Ma hurriedly explained. The general's expression froze when he heard this. He pulled on the reins and asked, "Are you talking about Commandant Tang Yo?" Seeing old Ma nod, the general was shocked. He hurriedly led old Ma into the commander's tent. The commander's tent was actually a house. In the front hall of a spacious house, there was a sand table of the entire Chang and the surrounding mountains. Behind the sand table was a large screen. On the screen was a map, but it had long been drawn with ink marks. There were old and new ones. When the two of them passed through the front hall of the commander's tent, they heard a rhythmic coughing sound. Old Ma found this rather novel, but the general didn't seem to find it strange. He led old Ma into the rear of the tent. "General, someone is coming from the mountain." Yu Qigong had been reading a military report with a frown. When he heard this, he hurriedly put it away. However, when he looked up and saw old Ma, he asked in surprise, "What is it?" Old Ma didn't dare hesitate. This was General Yu Qi, one of the 4 war gods. He hurriedly said, "General, the dean wants to find some people. He says he wants to train these people individually." Yu Qigong didn't mind. "Pass down the order. Pick a few good seedlings from the army and send them to the mountain." Seeing this, old Ma quickly interrupted Yu Qigong and said, "General, the dean wants to train Commandant Cheng and the others." "HM?" Yu Qigong was surprised. He looked at old Ma in surprise. "When did this happen? When did he say anything about this?" Old Ma hurriedly told him everything. The more he spoke, the more agitated Yu Qigong became. Of course, the cigarettes in his hand also changed one after another. His coughing became more and more severe. It wasn't clear whether it was because he was agitated or because he was choking on the smoke in the room, but old Ma's throat felt like it was on fire. Old Ma couldn't help but feel impressed by Yu Qigong. No wonder he was called the war god. Just this boldness, this ferocity of smoking, this throat and eyes, could it be that they were all made of iron? What the hell? He deserved to be called the war god. Yu Qigong wasn't thinking about anything else. Instead, he thought about something Zhang Feng had said a long time ago. He vaguely remembered that Zhang Feng had said that he wanted to train Cheng Chumo to become a heavy cavalryman and Zhang Sun to become the strongest light cavalryman. At this moment, he was looking at the situation. Yu Qigong couldn't help but slam the table. "It's done. Ah, old black, Fengzi has finally thought it through." Chapter 1409. Old Ma naturally knew that Yu Qigong's words weren't meant for him. However, when he saw how happy Yu Qigong was, he couldn't help but congratulate him excitedly. "Congratulations, General. Congratulations." Yu Qigong laughed heartily when he heard this. Then he waved his hands and said, "Don't be in such a hurry to flatter Lao Tzu. Is Fengzi going to let you train them this time?" Old Ma froze for a moment before he hurriedly said, "What the principal means is that I will accompany them in their training. The rest will be personally trained by the principal." Alright. Lao Tzu knew that Fengzi would make this move. Yu Qigong stood up and paced back and forth in the commander's tent. After a while, he told the guard, "Hurry up and invite General Cheng and Niu Jijie over. Tell them about this matter." He had no choice but to be happy. His 2 sons would be together. Although he didn't know how Fengzi would train his 2 sons, compared to old Black and old Niu, he would wake up smiling even in his dreams. If the cow saw that the tiger's leg was broken, it naturally wouldn't be able to do anything. All it could do was watch helplessly. How could Cheng Chumo compare to his 2 darlings? Compete in strength? His second son could lift a millstone with one hand. What could Cheng Chumo do? All these years, he had already been king stripped of his virginity by those little girls. Those 2 brats were the best. Although his upbringing was stricter and he was more obedient, he still had some strength. When the time came, as long as the emperor gave his approval, the Yuchi family would still benefit the most from this matter. How could he not be excited? Their official positions had basically reached their limits. They wouldn't be able to get promoted any further. In any case, they were still most concerned about their sons and nephews. This was the real battlefield where they would fight. Which family's son would be able to accomplish something if he had a promising future? A small matter was enough for them to brag about for an entire year, so how could Yu Qigong not be excited about such a big matter today? However, before he could get too excited, Cheng Yaojin and Niu Jinda rushed in with red eyes. As soon as they entered, they saw Yu Qigong's annoying look. They glared at old Ma and asked, Lao Tzu has seen you before. In the Liangzhou military camp, your name is? Replying to General Cheng, I, Ma Xinliang, am the instructor of the new recruits of the Liangzhou military camp. Upon hearing this, Cheng Yaojin's expression instantly relaxed. He was really afraid that Yu Qigong was trying to trick him. Seeing this, Cheng Yaojin narrowed his eyes and carefully sized up Ma Xinliang. I heard that Fengzi wants to turn our son into some special forces soldier? Ma Xinliang stood as straight as a ramrod. He couldn't help it. This man was the military god who would beat up anyone who disagreed with him. Among the three of them, his temper was the most unpredictable. It would be strange if he wasn't afraid, even though he was no longer a member of the military. However, this was a fear that was engraved in his bones. Right now, he couldn't help but be afraid. Niu Jinda hadn't said a word from the start to the end. It wasn't that he didn't want to speak, but that he was sullen. When he thought of his son lying at home, he was filled with anger. How could he be in the mood to speak? Now that such a good thing had happened, he could only watch helplessly. How could he feel comfortable? When he saw Yu Qigong's smug face, Niu Jinda's heart turned cold. He wanted to kill someone. After Cheng Yaojin asked him about the details, Yu Qigong stepped forward and patted Cheng Yaojin's shoulder smugly. Old Hey, let's make a bet. Believe it or not, this special forces soldier, my son and I will definitely. Fine. You're so cocky, okay? Lao Tzu only has one son, but didn't Feng Zi say that he wanted 50 people? You want 50 people? Just these few people aren't enough. Isn't that clear enough? When he heard this, Niu Jinda seemed to have grasped the main point. He hurriedly stepped forward and asked, Ma Xinliang, let me ask you. Did Feng Zi really say that he wanted 50 people? And he didn't allow people from the military to be used? The dean wants you to decide for yourselves. Before he said this, he asked me to find some veterans. However, when he found out that Shan was better and had gone to guard the house, he asked me to find a few young dukes. When he heard this, Niu Jinda slapped his thigh and said, Old Hey, old Yuchi, your sons are involved, but our son is still lying at home. When Cheng Yaojin and Yu Qigong heard this, alarm bells went off in their hearts. They asked suspiciously, What do you want? What I mean is very simple. I'll take all the remaining people. My Niu family only has one descendant. And this time, it's also because of the military training that your poor nephew broke his leg, so, scram, don't talk about it. If you dare to talk about this again, we won't be brothers anymore. Yu Qigong and Cheng Yaojin said almost at the same time. Ma Xinliang was so scared that his whole body trembled. He subconsciously slipped out of the door. However, he was stopped by Niu Jinda. This is what he said himself. Don't go back on your words. When my son broke his leg, the two of you were stingy and didn't give him anything. Instead, you secretly forced my son to drink. Don't think that I don't know. You promised to see the tiger and said that if there were any benefits in the future, you would all think about it. Fine, now I don't want anything. I just want the remaining quota. Cheng Yaojin grinned and said, You can dream a little better. Chapter 1410. Niu Jinda was stunned. Instantly his face twisted. Cheng Yaojin, what do you mean by this? Back then, when you were in my manor, that child Jinhu was closer to you than to me when he was in Longyu. He poured tea for you and called you uncle. Now you're starting to act shamelessly? Seeing Niu Jinda explode, Yu Qigong hurriedly comforted him. Old Niu, calm down. About this matter, I think Feng Zi should have other arrangements for Jinhu. Can you just wait? You see, even if we agree, do you think those old things will agree? Cheng Yaojin rolled his eyes and agreed. That's right. Think about what His Majesty is thinking. Think about it, Duruhui. Let's not talk about this. If you go to Xianxia, do you think that old thing will agree? Think about it. Why don't you think about it? Although we all have children involved in this, not everyone can persevere in the special forces. My son might be pulled down in a few days. You also know that our children are all spoiled and pampered. Fengzi will definitely know about such an important matter. They don't see that kid who can endure hardships. So, let's put our children aside for a while and talk about these 50 people first. How about it? After all, No matter how good we say it here, it will be His Majesty who will make the decision. Don't you think so? In an instant, the atmosphere in the tent became tense. Ma Xinliang's legs and stomach were twitching. He wanted to leave, but at this time, his sleeves were torn by Niu Jinda. He didn't dare to speak or move. The cold sweat on his face couldn't stop flowing down. Finally, he couldn't bear it anymore. Ma Xinliang shouted bitterly, "Generals, I still have to go find a few young dukes to quickly go up the mountain to report. This matter is still early. Can't you talk in private first?" Hearing this, Yu Qigong hurriedly said, "Old Niu, why are you pulling his clothes? After all, Feng Zi has other arrangements." "All of you, shut up for Lao Tzu." Niu Jinda was furious. How could he not know that at this time, if Ma Xinliang went to find someone to go up the mountain, then his son would really be fine? Seeing this, Yu Qigong and Qing Yaojin rolled their eyes and tried to persuade Niu Jinda, but Niu Jinda didn't listen to anything they said. Lao Tzu just wouldn't listen. The two of them couldn't help but get angry. Yu Qigong pointed at Niu Jinda's nose and said, "Old Niu, do you have any shame? Just because your son can't go, you want to take up so many spots? What are you trying to do?" "What am I doing?" Niu Jinda glanced at Lao Tzu and said, "Since Feng Zi wants to make this thing at this time, he must want to deal with that thing. Do you think Lao Tzu cares? Lao Tzu just thinks that my soldiers are all good. Look at your family." Without waiting for him to finish, Qing Yaojin said sourly, "But I heard that when you went to look for a mine, most of your men died on Longsho Mountain? How can you gather so many people at this time? Even if we have enough, the quality is still worrying." Seeing this, Yu Qigong hurriedly poured cold water on him and said, "Yes, yes, yes. Look, both of us are doing this for your own good. You also said that Feng Zi wants to train this thing this time because he wants to do that thing. That will cost him his life. Don't you want to keep people at home at this time? How could us old brothers watch this happen? So, you just stay calm and don't talk about this anymore." "Bastard! Are you seriously ganging up to bully Lao Tzu?" Niu Jinda angrily grabbed Qing Yaojin's beard. The pain made Qing Yaojin burst into tears. "Old Niu, are you King crazy? Hurry up and let go of Lao Tzu. Otherwise, when Lao Tzu gets angry, even I am scared. Come on. Lao Tzu is not afraid of you." "Old Yuchi, are you done laughing? Why aren't you helping? Are you asking for a beating? What are you trying to do?" In the end, in the midst of a fierce battle, Ma Xinliang scurried out of the battle in a daze. He could only hear the earth-shattering sounds of fists hitting flesh, as well as the sounds of things shattering. In the next moment, within the entire camp, within a radius of 30 feet from this tent, not a single person could be found. Everyone ran away, leaving not a single trace behind. It seemed that this kind of thing happened frequently here. No one dared to be unlucky at this time. After Ma Xinliang calmed down a little, he hurriedly borrowed a horse and fiercely whipped the horse to gallop away. When the people in the tent heard the neigh of the horse, they also showed a rare pause. Then, the three of them hurriedly rushed out of the tent with their clothes disheveled. When they saw that Ma Xinliang had actually run away, the three of them were instantly shocked. They hurriedly got a war horse and sped away while cursing and quarreling. It seemed that they were going to find the emperor to reason things out. After the three of them left, only then did the soldiers emerge from the sheepskin barracks with lingering fear. After ascertaining that the three of them had left, a few of the generals scolded loudly, "What are you all standing there for? Go do what you need to do." Chapter 14:11. In the palace, Li Shimin looked at the reports on the table about the blacksmiths that suddenly appeared in Chang, and these 2 days with a worried face. Since yesterday afternoon, the original 12 blacksmiths in Chang, in city had reopened one after another. What did this mean? It meant that they were instructed by one person. The person who instructed them was Wang clan? It was possible that Wang clan was involved. However, the premise was that the pair of hands behind him had not appeared. At this time, there was still no news from the iron ore on Mount Longsho. No one knew whether the iron ore had been found or not. If it had been found, why hadn't he received any news until now? It should be noted that it was already 9 o'clock today. There was still no news. Li Shimin couldn't help but feel a little upset. Because the pair of big hands showed him the 4 big families in Guangzhou who suddenly attacked yesterday and the forces behind them. These forces must know what happened yesterday. However, until now, he didn't see any abnormality in the people in the court, nor did he see any abnormality in the properties and secret sentries of these nobles in Chang. Did they really not know? Or did they do it on purpose? Or was it that these things were arranged in advance, and all this was a plot? In fact, there was nothing between the 4 big families in Guangzhou and these nobles. Just when Li Shimin was upset, little Gizi walked into the imperial study with a strange face, but Li Shimin didn't notice him at all. He was still rubbing his forehead and thinking about it. When little Gizi approached, Li Shimin noticed him and asked, "Little Gizi, tell me, does this have anything to do with those big families?" Little Gizi was stunned and hurriedly said, "Your Majesty, forgive me for not telling you. I let you tell me, so you tell me. I forgive you for everything." There were strict laws that forbade the imperial harem and eunuchs from participating in politics. If other ministers saw this, they would be impeached. Moreover, there were many people who coveted his position. Moreover, these people were basically people from those big clans. The reason was that they wanted to know the emperor's every movement at all times. In addition, yesterday's incident had not yet passed and was still causing a stir. At this time, there were definitely many people who were looking at the emperor's imperial study. At this time, if someone broke in, or if the eunuchs and palace maids heard it and spread the word, it would not be good for him. Therefore, little Gizi chose to play dumb. "Your Majesty, this servant thinks that this matter should be unrelated. Otherwise, these big clans would have come running here long ago." Hearing this, Li Shimin nodded. At this moment, Li Shimin seemed to have thought of something and asked, "What's the matter?" Replying to Your Majesty, General Yuqi, General Cheng, and Niu Jijia have been making a ruckus all the way here. Li Shimin frowned and scolded with mild anger, "Aren't we in the military camp at this time? What were they doing in the palace? Go, let each of them go to the Ministry of Justice to receive their punishment and get them back." Hearing this, little Gizi twitched the corner of his mouth and said, "Your Majesty, I'm afraid that's not possible. Just now, I heard that Prince Zhang wants to do something and wants all the young dukes to participate in it. Niu Jijia has been quarreling all the way to the palace because of his son's broken leg." Li Shimin was stunned. But then a look of horror flashed across his eyes and he said, "Let the 3 of them get in here." After a while, 3 half-grown old men stood in front of Li Shimin angrily. However, at this time, these 3 generals, who were feared and revered by everyone, made Li Shimin have the impulse to beat them in public. The 3 men's clothes were disheveled and even damaged in many places. Her hair bun and hairband were nowhere to be seen on her face. Her messy hair fluttered with the wind at the door. Li Shimin could even see strands of fleas falling from their hair to the ground. Li Shimin was furious when he saw this. "Look at you, where are your manners?" When the 3 of them heard this, none of them were willing to admit defeat. One after another, they told Li Shimin the whole story without missing a single word. Li Shimin was startled and asked, "Then do any of you know if Crown Prince and the others went up the mountain today?" When the 3 men heard this, they remembered the most important thing. Where was their son? After arguing for so long, they didn't seem to have seen their son since last night. When Qing Yaojin heard this, he asked carefully, "Your Majesty, was the Crown Prince in the morning court today?" Li Shimin frowned slightly and said, "He was in the morning court. Why are you asking this?" Qing Yaojin and the other 2 men looked at each other strangely and said, "My son went up the mountain after hearing that he left the palace last night." "Mine too. Mine seems to have disappeared last night." In an instant, how could the 4 men not know? They were so angry that their beards blew and their eyes widened. If there were people on the mountain, would Fengzi send people down the mountain to look for them? He must have gone to the brothel to spend the night again. Li Shimin waved his hand and said, "Leave them alone. You have seen Zhang Feng's new Mitsubishi knife. I just got the news that the iron mines and ironware shops in Chang are all open again." At this time, Fengzi chose to do this. What does it mean? It means that Fengzi wants to take the initiative to attack. Although Cheng Yaojin and the other two men knew it, they were still in an uproar at this time. Seeing this, Li Shimin sighed speechlessly and took the lead to walk out. When he reached the door of the imperial study, he said, "Accompany me to the mountain to ask Fengzi clearly." Chapter 1412. Prince Zhang, have a cup of hot tea first. In Zhang Feng's villa, Jing Shu looked at Zhang Feng quietly and handed him a cup of hot tea. Zhang Feng thanked her and put down the brush. He picked up the teacup and took a sip gently. The tea had been cold for a long time. Coupled with the tea leaves that Zhang Feng personally picked from the mountain, it was even more refreshing at this time. Zhang Feng smacked his lips and said, "Good tea." Jing Shu pursed her lips and smiled. She pointed to the papers full of words in front of Zhang Feng and asked, "What are you doing? I saw that you've been sitting for 4 hours. It's time to eat." "Just a little bit more. It'll be done in a while." Zhang Yuyao looked at the two of them from afar. She pouted and said with some jealousy, "It's already midnight. Can't you do it after eating? You didn't even have breakfast?" Zhang Feng smiled faintly. He got up and pulled Zhang Yuyao over. Then he took Jingshu's hand and said, "This is very important. You all know about what happened yesterday, right? I've also thought about it clearly. I don't have any desires. I just want to follow my heart and live a rich life. Although it's a little tacky, this is my dream. The reason why I want to be an official is that only when I'm high enough can I have enough deterrence and power. When the time comes, we won't fight for it. After we settle down, we'll retire. Then, our family will stay in Mount Shao, grow vegetables, and teach students. Isn't such a good life?" Zhang Yuyao and Jing Shu took the opportunity to sit next to Zhang Feng and asked, "Aren't you doing it now? And it seems that it's not far away." Zhang Feng sighed and said, "Sigh. I want to live a quiet life without any desires, but the prerequisite is to earn enough money, influence, and reputation. But as you can see, I, Zhang Feng, really don't care about ordinary business. But it's also because of this that the things I made were a little rushed, and that's why there's a conflict." Zhang Feng smiled. "That's right. That's a good thing. Us sisters often hear people praising them." Zhang Yuyao asked doubtfully. Zhang Feng shook his head and smiled bitterly. Jing Shu asked in surprise, "Why?" Zhang Feng stood up and pressed on the two women's shoulders. "Actually, what I targeted before was the common people. From pork to improving the quality of the pig's meat, it was nothing more than wanting to make cheap meat affordable for the common people. This was actually all for the sake of outsiders. I, Zhang Feng, am not such a saint." Zhang Yuyao was stunned and asked, "What is the Holy Mother?" Zhang Feng smiled and said, "It's nothing." Jing Shu thought for a while and said, "You mean to help the world?" Zhang Feng nodded and said, "Almost, but I don't think so. My thinking is very simple. I don't know who I told this to at the beginning, but I forgot. I just thought that when I go out one day, I can eat or use the things I make at any time. That's all." Zhang Feng pointed to the teacup in front of him and said, "The things people eat in this era are basically cooked in a pot. Even tea is basically added in some random things. What is this? In my eyes, this is simply vulgar behavior. Of course, I'm just complaining in front of the two of you." Jing Shu nodded and said, "Prince Shang's words are true. Previously, this little girl has even eaten the imperial banquet, the emperor's favorite national banquet dish, Hanyang Mohu. But compared to the delicious food that young master made now, it really tastes like chewing wax, not to mention such elegant and quiet tea. But, young master, what's with your medical skills? You said that this food is for the convenience of traveling in the future, and you can still eat such delicious food. Then, how do you explain your medical skills?" Zhang Feng smiled and shook his head. "Nothing can escape your eyes. Well, I'll make red braised pork for you to try tonight. I can guarantee that it's really delicious." When Zhang Yuyao heard this, her eyes instantly widened. She subconsciously glanced at the door and said, "Prince Zhang, keep your voice down. If they hear you, it won't be peaceful again." Zhang Feng pinched Zhang Yuyao's nose, teasing Zhang Yuyao until her face turned red. Then he said, "Actually, this medical skill, to put it bluntly, contains many things, such as medical hygiene, physical hygiene, and so on. I know that this has long been deeply ingrained in the hearts of the people, and it's difficult to change anything. But if you start with a doctor, it will be much easier. Look at the food on the street, those people's hands, and then look at the food. I really can't swallow it. They don't even know the principle of washing their hands before eating and after eating. And what's even more hateful is that after wiping their snot and wiping their buttocks, they put their hands into your bowl. Can you eat it? In an instant, Zhang Yuyao and Jingshu's faces turned pale. They repeatedly vomited and said, "Then according to what you said, in the future, we won't eat the food in the cafeteria on the mountain anymore. We'll cook our own food." Zhang Feng laughed and said, "That's not necessary. I've already made a set of standard cafeteria for the people on the mountain, and there's also a special kind of gloves. So, I can't guarantee the hygiene of other places, but I can still guarantee the hygiene of my academy's cafeteria. At least it's acceptable. However, this can only be considered passable." Chapter 14:13. Jingshu and Zhang Yuyao didn't know what medical hygiene was, nor did they know what physiological hygiene was, but in their opinion, it was just about cleanliness. But thinking about what Zhang Feng said just now, they instantly felt that everywhere was dirty. Those chefs, which one of them didn't have a handful of salt, a handful of vegetables, a handful of meat, and then a handful of sweat and snot? They didn't notice it before, but at this time, Zhang Feng said so. At this time, the two girls were scared and didn't dare to go outside to eat. Even outside of this villa, they didn't dare to eat anything in other places. For example, the barbecue made by Zhang Feng on the street. That thing, now that they thought about it, they even wondered how they ate it in the first place. Zhang Feng saw that the two girls' faces were extremely pale, so he couldn't say anything more. He hurriedly said that, in fact, this thing is to pay attention to hygiene, to avoid bacterial infection. The space we live in is full of bacteria, and all the diseases we know, such as fever, cold, headache, cough, diarrhea, and so on, are all bacterial infections. In order to not be infected by bacteria, we have to do something else, such as disinfection, alcohol, wine, salt, vinegar. They are all good things for disinfection. Zhang Feng explained the physiological hygiene knowledge to the two girls in detail. In an instant, the two girls shrank into a ball in horror and said, "Prince Zhang, why don't you get some mugwort and realgar to smoke the house?" "I see a lot of things." Zhang Feng looked and saw a beam of sunlight shining on the ground through the gap of the window, and in that beam of light, a little bit of dense dust flew up and down in the beam of light. Seeing this, Zhang Feng laughed and said, "This thing can't be helped. The things I said can't be seen with the naked eye. Forget it, I'll get some soap later. With that thing, it will be much better to wash and bathe every day. That thing can also make the skin tender." These were two words that they had never heard of. This made Jingshu and Zhang Yuyao extremely mad. They even had the impulse to bite Zhang Feng to death. In his eyes, why was everything he saw poisonous? At this time, a whisper came from the gap of the window, making Jingshu and Zhang Yuyao, who were playing with Zhang Feng, blush to their necks. Originally, they just wanted to make Zhang Feng happy. After all, such a big thing happened yesterday, Zhang Feng must be very uncomfortable. But who knew that these people dared to eavesdrop and let them see such a shameful thing? The two girls stomped their feet, turned around, and rushed to the second floor. Zhang Feng was also speechless. But more than that, he was annoyed. He glared at the door and said, "Are you all here? Get in here. I've been waiting for you since last night. Where did you go?" Li Qingqian and the others were stunned. They looked at Cheng Chumo and the others and said, "Feng Zi, I just came up the mountain. There were too many things last night. I didn't finish until this morning." Zhang Feng knew this. After all, there were so many things. It would be strange if they weren't busy. He pursed his lips and looked at Cheng Chumo and the others, who were avoiding his gaze, and asked, "What about you?" "We were also busy last night." Zhang Feng looked at them. How could he not know that these people must have gone to visit prostitutes last night, but he had no evidence. He could only say helplessly, "Since you're here, let's talk about the next thing." Seeing that Zhang Feng didn't continue to harp on it, they nodded hurriedly. Then, they returned to their original nature, smoking and lying on their backs. After they were all in position, Zhang Feng said speechlessly, "From tomorrow onwards, Tai Niu, Chong Zi, Desha, and the two brothers Yu Baolin and Gao Ken will start military training." Gao Ken, who was outside the door, heard this and ran in excitedly. Xiwa also ran in and asked, "Feng Zi, what about me?" Zhang Feng looked at Xiwa and said, "I have other plans for you." Seeing that Li Qian, Du Bing, and Feng Yai also wanted to ask, he hurriedly said, "I have other plans for you guys. Also, with your bodies, can you withstand the torture?" Cheng Chumo and the others were very excited. They had heard from Zhang Feng that he wanted to train them to be the elites of the elites. However, ever since Gao Can and Yuchi Baolin went to the barracks to learn military training, there was no more news. At this moment, Fengzi finally remembered this matter, thank the heavens. However, this wasn't a good thing for Li Chengqian and the others. At this moment, they looked at Zhang Feng with some resentment. Zhang Feng stared back at them embarrassedly and said, "I said don't look at me. You guys have more important things to do. Do you want the explosives I mentioned? If you want, then make them yourself." Hearing this, Li Chengqian and the others finally calmed down. Cheng Chumo and the others didn't care. Zhang Feng pointed at Yuchi Baolin and Gao Can and said, "Wait, the two of you should let them familiarize themselves with this military training method first. Tomorrow I will have Old Ma and Jia Daoren teach you the military's joint attack technique, as well as the individual combat ability. As for the rest, I will personally teach you. Tonight I will give you one night and tomorrow, at most, one day." Cheng Chumo and the others were already very excited. However, seeing Zhang Feng say these words so calmly, they couldn't help but ask curiously, "Feng Zi, what do you mean?" Zhang Feng looked at Cheng Chumo with a faint smile and said, "Because after tomorrow, your doomsday will come." Chapter 14:14. In an instant, Cheng Chumo and the others felt their hair stand on end. From what Yuchi Baolin had told them, what they had seen when they sneaked into the military camp, and the unspeakable pain of their friends in the military, they had thought that this was the worst they could do. However, they could accept it if they had to grit their teeth and become what Zhang Feng had promised to give them. However, looking at Zhang Feng now, it seemed that this was just the beginning? This was the reason why they were so scared. Cheng Chumo was furious. He hurriedly squatted beside Zhang Feng and massaged Zhang Feng's legs while asking, "Feng Zi, what are you planning to do?" How could Zhang Feng not know what they were planning at this time? He looked at them with a smile and said, "Actually, it's nothing much. I'm planning to form a special forces team. Yesterday's incident was a lesson. Zhang Feng, am not a pushover. I don't like to be watched and led by the nose. Therefore, I've decided to train you into a team of kings who walk in the dark. In the future, you will be able to find the big hand outside and get rid of them quickly. From now on, Li Qian and the others will be mainly responsible for the development and creation of weapons and new things, as well as experiments and so on. I'll give you priority to use all the good things they come up with. However, there's only one condition, and that is to hide yourselves well, use your strengths, and stir up the world for me." In an instant, everyone was aghast. This time, Zhang Feng was really going to be serious. Li Qingqian seemed to have thought of something. He said in surprise, "So this is why you modified the crossbow, the composite bow and musket you mentioned, and why you wanted to train them to become the strongest heavy cavalry, the strongest light cavalry, and the king of assassins?" After Li Chengqian said this, Cheng Chumo and the others realized in horror. Had Zhang Feng already planned everything when he promised to teach them how to become the best troops in the world? Oh my God! How big of a plan and how terrifying of a setup was it to accomplish all of this? Although Yuchi Baolin and the rest didn't know what they were talking about, Cheng Chumo and the rest's expressions made them realize that something was amiss. Come to think of it, none of this happened when Zhang Feng set up this workshop. However, after what had happened at that time, as well as what had happened today, they were horrified to discover the crux of the problem. It was as if Zhang Feng was setting up a huge trap. At the thought of this, Zhang Feng's villa was instantly filled with gasps. However, at that time, Zhang Feng really didn't think so much. At that time, his target was the Guanlong group, as well as the 5 surnames and 7 great clans. But who would have thought that there would be such a terrifying force behind these two forces? This was simply beyond the scope of Zhang Feng's understanding. Zhang Feng even searched through every corner of his mind, but could not find anything related to this in the known history. This was the scariest part. At one point, Zhang Feng even thought that this was caused by his transmigration, which caused the space to distort. And this world was different from the world he knew, so there were some differences in the 99% similarity? He couldn't figure it out. Why was this happening? This was what he found most inconceivable. That was why he used the original plan to deal with Guanlong and the 5 surnames and 7 great clans here. Zhang Feng nodded. Then he shook his head and said, "Back then I didn't think so far ahead. I only targeted Guanlong and the 5 surnames and 7 great clans, but who would have thought that such a thing would happen?" And Zhang Feng's answer also made Li Shimin and the others, who had just arrived at the door, hurriedly stop and listen carefully. Zhang Feng said, "In fact, it's very simple. I don't like to be watched by others, and I don't like to be manipulated by others. Instead of waiting to play tricks and schemes, it's better for me to do it myself, and return peace to all the people I care about. Therefore, in the next 1 month or even 2 months of urgent training, I will squeeze out all your potential in the shortest time possible, and then let you truly love you, and find the fighting method you are best at in the shortest time possible. For example, Iron Bull, you must not only display your own brute force, but also your stubborn nature. You must display it to the extreme. Public opinion is the most fatal weapon. You should have seen it yesterday. In fact, those methods of theirs were used by us, but we were not that shameless. It was also because of yesterday's matter that gave me a hint. If you want to stand firm, you have to be more shameless than the enemy. Sometimes, shamelessness is an extremely terrifying weapon." This made the faces of Li Shimin and the others turn black. They were about to enter the room, but were stopped by Wei Zheng. Li Shimin frowned, but after hearing Zhang Feng's next plan, he was even more shocked. He couldn't help but ask, "Feng Zi, is what you said true? If it's true, I will fully support you in this matter. I heard that you want 50 people for the whole team? I think it's a little too little. I'll give you 500 experts, how about it?" Chapter 14-15. Hearing this, Zhang Feng suddenly looked at the door and said in surprise, "My goodness, when did you get here? Have you found out anything about yesterday's incident?" As Li Shimin spoke, he hurried into the room with Wei Zheng and the others. He waved his hand and said, "Let's not talk about it for now. Tell me about your plan." Zhang Feng repeated what he had said before. Li Shimin's eyes narrowed slightly and said, "According to what you said, you want to set up a spy in the Tang dynasty? Not just one spy, but a spy network." Hearing Zhang Feng's words, Wei Zheng hurriedly said, "No. Absolutely not. This is the Tang dynasty. If the emperor finds out about this, or if others find out about it, it will be a crime that will lead to the extermination of the whole family. Feng Zi, you have to think about it carefully. The emperor may not care about the special forces you want to set up, but have you ever thought that the emperor, the ministers, or those big clans don't have spies? Do you know what we found out about yesterday's incident?" Li Shimin was also a little confused at this time. He ignored Wei Zheng. Seeing this, Wei Zheng said, "Feng Zi, I know you have ideas and thoughts, but you should know that such a thing is not allowed in any dynasty or country, let alone in the Tang dynasty." Zhang Feng hurriedly interrupted Wei Zheng. He was almost led astray by Old Wei. He hurriedly said, "Old Wei, why does everything you say have something to do with the imperial court? My special force is actually the security team on the mountain, but it's for the outside world. Our industry is now spread all over Chang, and in many places near Chang. Moreover, the opening of the waterway also needs some security guards to maintain the normal business order, right? We don't participate in other things. We just want to prevent people from targeting us. What's wrong with that? Besides, it's not like we haven't done such things in Chang and city before." Wei Zheng asked suspiciously, "What are you talking about?" "It's the method that I mentioned before. We used to promote deep-fried locusts, bone-strengthening powder, and so on. What's more, what Time Yo and the others need to do now is to focus on the rumors of the 5 families and 7 major clans, Guanlong and Shandong landlords, and draw out the pair of big hands behind them. Only in this way can we ensure that Shao Mountain and even Chang and city won't fall into chaos. Actually, this is also called diverting the disaster. Feng Xianling was a little confused and asked, "Then why did you let them do this?" "That's right, Feng Zi. If it's just creating rumors, these kids are all talented and can do it easily. Why do they need to learn these things?" Yu Qigong and the others asked curiously. Zhang Feng nodded and said, "You're all right. In fact, that's what this thing means. However, have you ever thought about it? Is it just to create rumors? What's the purpose of creating rumors? We're doing this because we want to find out the real culprit behind this. In the next quarter of an hour, I'll train them on their ability to resist attacks, their endurance, their reaction speed, their ability to distinguish positions by listening, and their ability to react quickly. These are all necessary skills, and they'll be able to settle down in the future. I don't need them to kill people. In fact, I'm doing this for them to protect themselves." "Yes. Give them the ability to protect themselves." This time, everyone was in an uproar. Cheng Chumo and the others felt even more uncomfortable. These things seemed very simple. He knew all about sensitivity and so on. But what did it mean by protect themselves? Could it be? At this time, Li Shimon's expression became a little solemn. At the same time, he was also a little conflicted. This group of people, if successfully trained, would be very important to the imperial power in the imperial court. But the only bad thing was that if these people's identities were discovered, what would happen to the imperial court? What would happen to the big hand behind this? If all these were discovered to be Zhang Feng's idea, or if these people's faces were seen by others, then, "Fengzi, why don't we do this later? I think it's too risky. Think about it, if these people are recognized, what will happen?" Zhang Feng nodded and said, "I know this." Li Shimon was stunned. "If you know, then why do you still do it?" "Because I know, that's why I have to get them out. Have you ever thought about why I only want 50 people and not more?" Li Shimon really didn't know about this. Zhang Feng looked around and said, "In fact, I want to divide them into 5 teams. Tai Nyo and the others will be the team leaders, and I'll specially make clothes, equipment, masks, and so on suitable for them. I want them to be the most terrifying existence in the world. Have you ever thought about how the emperor will feel if he knows about this?" Li Shimon's voice fell. In an instant, everyone looked slightly surprised. They subconsciously looked at Zhang Feng, waiting for his answer. This time, the emperor seemed to be really angry. This was really a difficult thing to do. If it was not done well, the world would be in chaos. Zhang Feng spread out his hands and pointed at Cheng Chumo and the others. "That's why I arranged 6 of them. The extra one will be the team leader of the special forces, and the team leader will be rotated every 3 months. Most importantly, why did I choose retired soldiers? Do you know the reason?" Chapter 14:16. Who could guess what Zhang Feng was thinking? Hearing Zhang Feng's words at this time, Li Shimon was unhappy, but he still asked, "What's your plan?" Zhang Feng smiled faintly and said, "These people have good qualities and are loyal to the emperor and patriotism. Although they have retired, they are still in contact with people in the army, such as superiors, brothers, and so on. Their existence will inevitably be passed to the emperor's ears. And if my guess is right, the emperor will not touch our people for the time being." Li Shimon's expression became a little strange and said, "Are you so sure?" "So sure. You don't believe me, Lao Li? Go and ask old Yu. This guy almost choked me to death last time when I wanted to build a fully automatic textile factory. Why did he do that? Don't you know that he sends a lot of materials to his brothers in the army every year?" Hearing this, Li Shimon suddenly understood. Although he had known this for a long time and knew that this matter was fake, it was fake after all. At this time, Zhang Feng was telling the truth. Zhang Feng didn't wait for Li Shimon to ask and continued, "In fact, they will think that they are just passing on the materials between brothers. But what they don't know is that these generals are the god of war of the Tang dynasty. How can they escape from their eyes and ears?" Yu Qigong, Niu Jinda, Qing Yaojin, and the others heard this and couldn't help but feel a little happy in their hearts. But the next moment, Zhang Feng said again, "And if they know these things, who will they tell? Of course, it will be the emperor. These people are loyal to the emperor, which is not comparable to ordinary people. But these people also have a disadvantage, which is that they like to drink too much. When they drink, they like to quarrel, and when they quarrel, they like to scare and brag. If we want to keep this matter a secret, we'll have to rely on His Majesty's actions. Everything we've done has been done from the perspective of the great Tang, so you can be at ease. His Majesty won't blame us and will only support us even more. Moreover, once we defeat this major clan, the one who will benefit the most will still be His Majesty. Do you think His Majesty is a fool? Does he really want to rush up and fight these big aristocratic families? Li Shimin wanted to laugh. Is this how I am in your heart? Li Shimin was speechless and asked, this is just your guess. If the emperor knows this, why do you think he will choose to believe it? And what if other ministers, such as the civil officials, know it? Then you're thinking too much. Zhang Feng waved his hand and said, Lao Li, you just don't pay attention to the court. Think about it, how many people in the court are profiting because of the salt, the trade with Xianxia, the beer, barbecue, and other things? These are all our things. At this time, they have long been used to this way of eating. Brewing beer, making salt, making braised meat, and removing the smell of pig's meat are all in our hands. How can they not think of the pros and cons? We're dealing with a common enemy. Only by killing all these guys can we truly make a fortune together. Old Li, do you think you'll end up like you because of those old foxes? There's also Lao Li. Zhang Feng patted Li Shimin on the shoulder and said, you are really not suitable for business. But fortunately, you have Lao Li. Also, I found a good seedling for you. If you train him with all your strength, I believe that in less than 10 years, even if you don't want any title, you can stomp your feet in any country and the emperor will come running to invite you. Do you believe it? Ha! Li Shimin laughed with a fake smile. Hearing this, Zhang Feng wanted to slap him. Of course, he was talking about the money string. However, this guy needed to be properly trained. He definitely couldn't do it here. With two beautiful fiancées around, others might not feel at ease, but he, Zhang Feng, couldn't. So at this time, teaching Xianxia was difficult. He thought he could use this opportunity to push him to Lao Li, but this old thing was too cunning and didn't take the bait at all. Zhang Feng could only say helplessly, actually, these are not important. The most important thing is that if the emperor wants to hold power and defeat these big clans, he has to stand with me. It's that simple. In addition, the great Tang's economy is currently flourishing. How could His Majesty allow these great clans to sway? For example, during the autumn planting this time, the Wang clan suddenly cut off the ironware supply. If something like this happens again, then it will be an extremely terrifying existence. Hearing this, Li Shimin coughed confidently and said, Fengzi, let me tell you a piece of good news. In Chang and City, more than a dozen ironware shops and blacksmiths were all opened yesterday afternoon and today morning. Huh? Zhang Feng couldn't wrap his head around it. After a while he asked, what you said, is it true? They really opened all of them? Li Shimin spread his hands and said calmly, do I need to lie to you? Zhang Feng heard this and was instantly dumbfounded. What the F***ck is this? Chapter 1417. The ironware workshops in Chang and were basically managed by the Ironware Bureau of the Agriculture Department of the Ministry of Works. No one knew whether it was good or bad that such a big problem occurred at this time. Shut it down. Then shut it down. But why would it be opened again at this time? What kind of operation was this? Everyone saw clearly what happened in Chang and City yesterday. At this time, to open this thing in Chang and City was to court death. What was the meaning of this? Was it deliberately aimed at them? Zhang Feng really didn't understand. At this time, to get all these people out, there was no doubt that there was a problem. Did the Wang family really want to confront them? Li Shimin saw Zhang Feng's doubts and gently waved his hand. Fang Xianling said, Fengzi, do you know what the emperor found out since these shops opened yesterday and when we went up the mountain today? Zhang Feng naturally didn't know, so he asked, what did he find out? Fang Xianling smiled faintly and inadvertently glanced at Li Shimin. Seeing that Li Shimin didn't speak, he said slowly, there are other people behind these shops, but some of them are local people in Chang. When the farming season comes, these people will bring things to the fields to sell their farm tools, but not everyone is like this. This is just a part of them. Some of them also have farms in their families. I think there are strict rules in their laws. During the autumn planting season, no matter what happens, they can't affect or delay the planting. Those who violate the rules will be severely punished. And 5 of them are from the Wang family, but they are all collateral relatives of the Wang family. They have nothing to do with the Wang family. The last sentence was the key point. Zhang Feng couldn't help but frown deeply when he heard that. You mean, the Wang family really doesn't know what happened in Chang'an City? That's too strange, isn't it? Think about it, this is the Wang family. And where was this place? After investigating so many things, almost all of them have the Wang clan's shadow. Look, after returning from Nantian, it was the iron mine that suddenly ran out of stock. Then, they went to the 4 major clans to cause trouble. Which one of them didn't have the Wang clan's shadow behind them? Now you're telling me that this wasn't done by the Wang family? Is this a joke? Zhang Feng suspected that Lao Li had been bribed by the Wang family. Who couldn't see such an obvious thing? Most importantly, the Wang family had always been in contact with them the most. They were also the most suspicious. At this time, no matter who it was, the Wang family had nothing to do with this matter. Zhang Feng could only respond with a chuckle. However, he never thought that it would be Lao Li's son who told him about this. This was what surprised him the most. Lao Li, what benefits did the Wang family give you to make you speak for them like this? Li Shimin shook his head and sighed. If only that were the case. Think about it, what benefits does the Wang family get by targeting us, the emperor and the people of the world? This is a criminal law that even a 3-year-old child knows about. Do you think the Wang clan's people don't know? At first, I also suspected that the Wang clan was behind all this. However, when Lord Zhangsun personally showed me the results of the investigation last night, I realized that the Wang family seemed to be pushed out by someone, just like Kong Yingda. Huh. Zhang Feng's hair stood on end when he heard that. The Wang clan was pushed out to be a shield? How was that possible? Who was so charming that the Wang clan was willing to be a shield? For a moment, Zhang Feng felt that this hand seemed to be too big. From the war at the border, to some people in the imperial court, to the 5 families and 7 clans, to the nobles in Shandong, could it be? Zhang Feng's expression changed instantly. Could it be that the people in Guanlong were also instructed by them? But they were unintentionally destroyed by him, and he even got his allies, which made this mysterious person angry out of humiliation. Thinking of this, Zhang Feng suddenly understood. It seemed that everything made sense. From the incident in Nantian to the return to Chang, and these things seemed to have just begun to brew. All of this really seemed like revenge. When he thought of this, the question returned to the original starting point. Was this manipulated by someone? Or what? Otherwise, why would these shops that didn't belong to the same power choose to open at the same time overnight? It didn't make sense at all. And most importantly, after what happened in Chang'an City yesterday, no one would choose to open at this time, right? Zhang Feng's face gradually became gloomy. He said lightly, I understand. This is a threat. Li Shimin nodded. You're right. I didn't notice it before, but this morning I figured out why these people chose to open at the same time yesterday, and why the power behind the Mi family, Bai family, Tang family, and Gao family didn't do anything. As he spoke, Li Shimin said with a grave expression, Fengzi, have you ever thought that these people might have been fabricated by someone? In fact, how could there be any nobles behind them? Chapter 14:18. In fact, Zhang Feng had already thought of Li Shimin's idea just now. However, this matter was too mysterious. Zhang Feng himself didn't believe it. How could such a thing happen? But now that Li Shimin said this, Zhang Feng's expression couldn't help but stagnate. Zhang Feng's expression was extremely solemn. He didn't speak. He sat there and smoked while thinking about things. After thinking for a while, he said, You're right. I also thought about it. But don't you think that if this matter is really as you said, it's too scary? What are you talking about? Why are you so anxious? Fengzi, just tell me, who do you want to beat up? I'll find someone to beat him up now. Qing Yaojin couldn't stand it. He rolled up his sleeves and was about to beat someone up. Fang Xianling hurriedly pulled Qing Yaojin back and said, "Old He, calm down first. This matter has to be done slowly. Now we don't even know who is causing trouble. How are we going to deal with it? Who do we beat up? Tell me about it. You can't beat up whoever you don't like, right? It's still better than being cooped up here. This is 2F** King frustrating," Qing Yaojin said indignantly. Zhang Feng didn't know that this was a provocation. He said speechlessly, "I say, old Qin, if you want to find an excuse, can't you find a better one? It's not fun to play like this." "Well, since you said this, then I'll explain it to you. In fact, this matter will be solved eventually. But as for how to solve it, that's secondary. Aren't I building a special team now? When my special forces team is done, there won't be any monsters to hide." Cheng Yaojin curled his lips and said, "With your people, the dishes will be cold by the time you're done." Li Shimin nodded slightly and glared at Cheng Yaojin. Cheng Yaojin immediately shut up. In fact, Li Shimin had been worried about this for a long time. When he was outside the door, Li Shimin heard his conversation and knew some of the ways and means. 2 months. Within these 2 months, it could happen at any time. It couldn't wait for 2 months. Seeing this, Zhang Feng glanced at Li Shimin and said, "I really underestimated you." "Yes, I do have a plan that I haven't told you." Li Shimin guessed that Zhang Feng had other plans. He hurriedly asked, "Then tell me, what do you think?" Zhang Feng gestured for everyone to sit down, then slowly said, "Actually, Tainyo and the others really need to go and train. This is the last step, the last step. They will only be used as a last resort. At the very least, they will be able to form a fighting force after 2 months. Only then will they be able to determine victory and defeat. During this period, we have to find the mastermind behind this. I have a terrible intuition that this mastermind's plot may not be simple." Li Shimin's face suddenly changed. From the border issue, to the arms smuggling, and to some things that could be manipulated in Chang, it seemed that this mastermind's plot was not small. But it didn't seem to be a big deal, right? But this matter revealed a hint of strangeness. Everything was too coincidental. Coincidentally, right after the Tang dynasty dealt with the food shortage, there was a border war, which scattered most of the Tang dynasty's forces. Even more coincidentally, India and the Turks suddenly formed an alliance at this time, not to target the Tang dynasty, nor Tubo and other countries. Instead, they chose a remote place, Zhenla. What was their intention? Zhenla was surrounded. He had guessed that the emperor would send troops to help. If the emperor didn't send troops, Zhenla and the Potato Kingdom would think that they had no ability to estimate their allies. Once this idea was formed, it would instantly damage the reputation of the Tang dynasty. In this case, it could easily cause the prestige of the Tang dynasty to be damaged. Shiwei, Goguryeo, Zhenla, Tubo, Tuyuhun, and other countries in the north would instantly panic. If anything happened to the Tang dynasty, they would definitely send troops at the first moment. What was his intention? As he thought of this, Li Shimin hurriedly asked, "Fengzi, what do you think this mysterious person or mysterious thing is scheming?" Imperial power. Zhang Feng really didn't want to say this word. However, after thinking about it, he decided not to say it out loud. After all, if the emperor were to find out about it, or if other people with ulterior motives were to hear it, he would be completely finished. This wasn't talking about imperial politics, it was courting death. The current crown prince, Li Chengqian, or Li Tai could be the culprit. But he had heard that Li Tai was only 6 or 7 years old. What would a child like him know? As for Li Chengqian, although there was indeed a case of Li Chengqian usurping the throne in history, it was because of Li Tai. But there was no need for him to make preparations so early, right? And that Hou Junji didn't seem to be doing much at this time. Zhang Feng had seen Hou Junji before, so he paid close attention to him. This man was the main culprit behind Li Chengqian's coup. But given the current situation of the Tang dynasty, as long as Hou Junji wasn't a fool, he wouldn't allow Li Chengqian to jump out at this time. Moreover, these matters were far too complicated. Zhang Feng had thought that the mastermind behind the scenes might be Hou Junji. After all, this man had once been a famous scholar, and his son had a rather high prestige in the military. The reason he had bravely retreated to protect himself was because he wanted to support Crown Prince Li Chengqian. But, at present, Hou Junji didn't seem to have the ability to make the people of the 5 clans and 7 clans and the nobles of Shandong listen to his orders. And there was also the problem of the border. He was Hou Junji. What ability did he have to lay down such a terrifying net? Was he worthy? Chapter 1419. Alas! Zhang Feng rubbed his head with a headache. He really couldn't figure out who had such great ability to do such an awesome step. Damn it, it was impossible to succeed. Now that he thought about it, it seemed that all of this was really impossible. After all, the probability of success was almost 0. Could it be that several forces joined forces? Just like Guanlong and the people of the 5 surnames and 7 clans supported Li Yuan to overthrow Yangguang? Zhang Feng had an even bigger headache at this time. He rubbed his temples and said, forget it. Let's not think about it. It's not good for us to guess blindly here. After all, even if the sky falls, there are still tall people to hold it up for us. Li Shimin didn't like to hear this. Why did you stop at the critical moment? I've already prepared, and you're telling me this? Li Shimin said speechlessly, Fengzi, just say it. Although there is a tall person to hold it up, could it be that the tall person you're talking about is the emperor? Zhang Feng nodded. Yes, who else do you think has such ability? Li Shimin was immediately unhappy. What the hell was this? He hurriedly said, don't be like this. Tell me, what is your guess? Fang Xianling and the others also looked at Zhang Feng anxiously. If Zhang Feng could really guess the person or direction, then they would have a direction to pursue. They wouldn't be led by the nose like now, right? Zhang Feng looked at everyone strangely and said, I think there's something wrong with your heads. The emperor hasn't said anything. What are you shouting for? And wasn't yesterday's lesson enough? You want to find trouble for me again today, right? Li Shimin's face stiffened when he heard this. While coughing, he kicked Fang Xianling and Wei Zheng, making them pretend that they didn't notice. They lowered their heads and pondered. Li Shimin had no choice but to bite the bullet and say, aren't we just chatting for fun? Besides, what's the big deal if you say it roughly? We still have some precautions, don't we? It's better than not knowing anything, right? If we really encounter a problem at that time, it will be too late even if we want to pull down our businesses. Li Shimin poured out a lot of bitter water. To put it bluntly, he just wanted Zhang Feng to say 1, 2, 3. He knew that Zhang Feng must have known something. But this was also a coincidence. Zhang Feng really wasn't acting tough this time. He really didn't expect this. But Li Shimin didn't believe it. Zhang Feng couldn't help but want to slap himself. Alright, don't think too much. This time, I really didn't know what went wrong, and I really didn't know who was behind it. If I knew who was behind it, do you think I, Zhang Feng, would still be sitting here right now? Li Shimin sighed in disappointment. Things were back to square one. This undoubtedly made him feel even more depressed. He thought that Zhang Feng really knew who was behind it, but now it seemed that Zhang Feng didn't know the specifics. It seemed that this kid didn't know as much as I did this time. Li Shimin was a little happy. After all, it was rare to see Zhang Feng suffer. Looking at Zhang Feng, Li Shimin smacked his lips and said, Fengzi, didn't you just say that you wanted Li Gan and the others to get some gunpowder? What kind of operation is this? Right. At the mention of this, Li Shimin instantly remembered that Zhang Feng seemed to have said that there was still something to do. He hurriedly said, didn't you just say that Tai Niu and the others were the last step? What about before that? It can't be that you want Gan and the others to use gunpowder, right? Zhang Feng wanted to say something, but seeing Li Shimin's annoying look, he finally held back. After a while, he said, do you think that gunpowder is a wild vegetable by the roadside? That it will come as you say? That thing is prepared for Chiotzi. Once it is delivered to Chiotzi, it will set the beginning of our plan for the trade route. And the decisive power of this war has nothing to do with our plan. Don't even think about it. This thing is a hot potato. Whoever holds it will suffer. Later, I will make this thing and you will send it to the palace tonight. This thing will be a headache for the emperor. Also, during this period, I remember that Li Gan has a group of powerful people under him. Do you know Lao Li? Hearing this, Wei Zheng and the others were secretly shocked. Could it be that the crown prince was gathering power in the imperial court? Li Shimon's expression gradually became serious. He glanced at Wei Zheng and the others, then looked into Zhang Feng's eyes and asked, "Feng Zi, who told you about this? Why don't I know about it? What ability does he have to gather a group of powerful people? It is nothing more than a group of stubborn sons." Zhang Feng waved his hand and said, "You misunderstood. I know that he can't hold a court meeting. What I mean is, does he know some hooligans in Chang'an City?" "I say, you mean Qianhe, those spies in the city?" Zhang Feng nodded and said, "That's right. Same old rules. If Li Gan has such connections, I believe that your connections are even wider. What I want is your connections. Use the old ways to spread rumors about me." Chapter 1420. The eyes of Li Shimin and the others lit up in an instant. That's right. An eye for an eye. In this case, as long as the momentum was built up, they really had a chance to get something out of these people. After all, villains were hard to guard against. Zhang Feng said again, "In fact, it's easy to understand. Everyone is very tight-lipped, especially about this kind of thing. But it doesn't mean that everyone will be so tight-lipped. And the most important thing is that they always have a maid or some subordinates, right? As long as we change the direction of the spearhead, it's easy to get some clues. In the past, we always looked at the sky. Now, let's not look at the sky anymore. The things in the sky have already been killed by them. Now we only need to look at the ground. The water on the ground and the mud will leave a trace of their footprints, right? As long as we follow the footprints, it will always be easier. But this is also a matter of risk." Li Shimin was listening with great interest. At this time, when he heard Zhang Feng's words, he couldn't help but feel as if he had fallen into an abyss. He already had some ideas. At this time, when Zhang Feng said this, Li Shimin asked subconsciously, "What's the risk? Isn't it just a matter of a sentence?" For him, this was not even an imperial edict. Not to mention the crown prince, there were hundreds of spies in Chang and under his command. And this kind of rumor had been around since the locusts. At this time, it seemed to be the best way to use this. What these people did was somewhat similar to what Zhang Feng said. If they could find clues, they would basically erase them. Now it was really impossible to find clues from this. Thinking about it, Li Shimin said anxiously, "Feng Zi, are you worried that if this matter gets out of hand, it will arouse the emperor's anger?" Zhang Feng nodded and said, "Indeed. After all, this is under the emperor's rule. We have to be careful if we do something here. If someone tells the emperor and impeaches us, then, even if we have the support of Lord Zhangsun, the emperor will probably be angry." It's fine. Lord Zhangsun told me about this method today. His Majesty seems to have the same idea, but it's just an idea. Now that you said it, I think it's feasible." Zhang Feng was surprised. "You mean, the emperor also has the same idea?" "Yes." "Then why didn't you say so earlier?" Zhang Feng glared and said, "All right, since we've discussed it, there's no need to continue. After all, I don't know if there are any spies on the mountain. I'm prepared to make a big deal about Tai Nyo and the others. At the very least, I want everyone on the mountain to know that they are just a cover. They are the ones who are stirring up trouble on the surface. The ones who spread the rumors in Chang'an City are the main ones. Once they find clues, I will let Tai Nyo and the others take action. Didn't you say that the iron mine has recovered? If that's the case, it means that our people on Mount Longsho have found the ore. This is a good thing. This way, I can speed up the forging workshop on the mountain. At the same time, I won't let Li Gan and the rest leave the mountain for the time being. Once the phosphate fertilizer technology is confirmed and the phosphate fertilizer factory is set up, they will devote all their efforts to the research and development of this technology. The Research Institute. This was the lifeline of White Deer College. Rather than saying that Zhang Feng had built an academy, it was more accurate to say that the entire academy was a channel for the Research Institute to provide fresh blood. It was also a pretense. Once these people focused their attention on the academy itself, they would not be able to do anything. Only then would he have the chance to stir up trouble under their noses. For example, this bomb. This was the most important thing at the moment. Once he confirmed it, at the very least, there would be no wars at the border for the time being. Once it was delayed until the next spring, when the grains were harvested, everything would be much easier. With grains in hand, wouldn't it be a piece of cake for them to attack wherever they wanted? Now, all the food was concentrated in the hands of the wealthy families. There weren't many fields that belonged to the commoners. Zhang Feng didn't want to reform the farmland system. That would be courting death. Think about how Wang Mang died in history. This was a lesson learned from the mistakes of the past. This phosphate fertilizer project almost caused him to fail. When the time came, would he have to change the farmland system? Even if His Majesty agreed, would the other civil and military officials agree? It wasn't impossible to get them to agree. As long as their granaries were filled and their food became common goods, they would only worry about having more fields. To put it bluntly, it was still a lack of food. Once there was more food, how could there be such a problem? 10,000 miles, how could such a thing happen? Once he thought of Qian Wanli, Zhang Feng's expression darkened. Li Shimin also noticed the change in Zhang Feng's expression. He didn't know how to comfort him. He only sighed and said, "Don't think about this anymore. We'll talk about it when we find the mastermind." "Alright, Fengzi, tell me, this phosphate fertilizer really has such a miraculous effect. Also, what exactly is that thing you planted in the East Court?" Chapter 1421. Zhang Feng was stunned. His expression changed in an instant. "You went to my East Court?" Li Shimin shook his head again and again. He pointed at Niu Jinda and said, "I don't know. Ask him." In one sentence, he completely betrayed Niu Jinda. Niu Jinda was depressed. But who asked him to be the emperor? Niu Jinda had no choice but to bite the bullet and say with a smile, "Well, last time, when he saw that the tiger leg was slightly better, he wanted to go and thank you. But we heard that you went down the mountain and thought that you were in your residence, so we went to visit you. But we didn't know what gift to bring, so we brought you a calligraphy and painting." That kid was very curious. He couldn't sit still and wanted to wander around the courtyard, saying that he wanted to breathe fresh air. In the end, he saw the old man at the entrance of the East Court. Niu Jinda knew that this matter could not be hidden, and he also wanted to know what that thing was. Even the imperial physician did not know what it was. It showed how precious this thing was. It had already happened. What could Zhang Feng say? He glared at Niu Jinda speechlessly and said, "Old Niu, I really didn't hide this matter. That thing is actually an experiment. I don't know if it will work. And the seed of that thing, as far as the current situation is concerned, there are only a few of us in the entire Tang dynasty. As for whether there are other places, I don't know. In short, I got it from a merchant in the western regions. I heard that it floated over from the other side of the sea." At this time, if Zhang Feng's history was true, then the magical potato should still be in America. And there was only one place that could float over from the sea. It must have come from the Strait of Sherway, from North America all the way across the sea, or because of a typhoon. This was the only explanation that could be found now. Then, it was obtained by these merchants as a treasure. But this thing was bitter raw, so no one knew what it was. It floated all the way to the western regions. In the end, it fell into Zhang Feng's hands. How many coincidences must there be for such a miraculous thing to happen? What if this thing got soaked in the seawater and became rotten? What if this thing sprouted along the way? That was the most amazing thing. After a series of coincidences, it fell into Zhang Feng's hands. It would be strange if Zhang Feng didn't treat it as a treasure. Zhang Feng explained, "This thing's scientific name is potato. It's a rare treasure in No. 1 middle school. As for how precious it is, I can't tell you for the time being. Anyway, I'll give you a surprise when the time comes." Seeing that Zhang Feng was unwilling to say, Li Shimin had no choice but to treat him as a treasure. Something that Zhang Feng treasured so much must be a treasure. But as for how precious it was, that was unknown. But in Li Shimin's opinion, no matter how precious it was, it shouldn't be like this, right? He didn't take it seriously and shook his head. That potato, did it also use this phosphate fertilizer? Zhang Feng nodded. Didn't you all see it? Since you've seen it, why are you still asking me? Okay, don't ask any more. If I say that phosphate fertilizer is useful, it's really useful. If there's nothing else, I'll go and do the experiment now. I'll try to get this thing done in a short time. All right, Lao Li, have you found the factory I asked you to find? Li Shimin saw that Zhang Feng brought the question back to the main topic and sighed. It's done. Didn't old Niu find the phosphate stone mine at the south foot of Longsho Mountain? I'm going to build the factory there. Behind that place is the royal plantation. Further south is the Daming Palace in Chang'an City. It's also the most heavily guarded place in Chang. Under normal circumstances, there won't be any problems. As for the factory, I've already found someone to build it. But that place is too barren. There's not even water. Are you sure you want to put it there? No water? Zhang Feng was stunned. Water was an important step in the extraction of phosphate fertilizer. If there was no water, it would be troublesome. Zhang Feng thought for a while and asked, I remember that there's water on Longsho Mountain, right? I have a map here. Take a look at it first. Li Shimin took out a map from his arms. This was a detailed map of the entire area from Daming Palace to Longsho Mountain. However, this was a map that Li Shimin redrew after removing some important military advisors. Zhang Feng looked at the mountains and ravines on the map and couldn't help but frown slightly. The map was very detailed. The names and directions of the mountains were clearly marked on it. The area with the phosphate stone in the south foot of Longsho Mountain wasn't big. It was just a mountain that extended to the royal plantation on the main peak of Longsho Mountain. Perhaps it was because the soil and water here was too fertile that the emperor chose to build the royal plantation here. As for the area where the phosphate stone was located, although it was a stretch of sloping land, there wasn't a single river or canal. Perhaps this was why the emperor didn't choose to build the royal plantation here even though it was more fertile. Instead, he chose another place. This was difficult to handle. Zhang Feng couldn't help but feel somewhat distressed. Chapter 1422. However, there was no water, so there was no way to make it. Moreover, the toxicity of this thing was too great. This piece of land was a wasteland. There was no trace of people within 100 miles. It was a natural barrier. It was a good choice to build the phosphate fertilizer factory here. If the factory was moved and the poisonous gas leaked out, it would be bad. It might even give people a reason to talk about it. Seeing Zhang Feng frowning, Li Shimin came forward and asked, Take a look. What do you think of this place? If it doesn't work, just move it 10 miles south to the Longsho Canal. Zhang Feng interrupted Li Shimin and said, Lao Li, this thing can only be here. You know how important this thing is. Once people know too much about it, it will be fatal. Moreover, the raw stone of this thing is poisonous. If something happens to the palace, none of us will be able to handle it. Moreover, although the place is good and the transportation is convenient, this is also the drawback. Actually, this method of making phosphate fertilizer is not complicated. Anyone who learns it will be able to do it. Do you think that this business will be learned by others? At this moment, Li Shimin suddenly came to his senses. Tell me, without water, what do we do? Zhang Feng snapped his fingers and said, Actually, there is a way to do this thing. Think about it, who am I? I am Zhang Feng. Li Shimin rolled his eyes. If you have something to say, just say it. What time is it now? Are you still bragging? Zhang Feng was shocked by Li Shimin's words, but he was not angry. He chuckled and said, Now you know why I asked Li Gan and the rest to stay and do this, right? As he spoke, Zhang Feng shouted at the door, Shiva, go and call Li Gan and Du Bing over. I have something to tell them. Not long after, Li Chengqian and Du Go came in, but they looked reluctant. They had just heard everything from Shiva. Why was he calling them over now? Wasn't it because he wanted them to go to that place? Who would want to go to such a desolate and uninhabited place? However, he still had to enter the door. The emperor and other officials were present, so he did not dare to act rashly. As soon as he entered the door, Zhang Feng said with a smile, I remember that I asked you guys to make me a water wheel when the workshop just started, right? Li Chengqian was shocked when he heard this. If Zhang Feng hadn't mentioned it today, he would have forgotten about it long ago. Moreover, he had thought that Zhang Feng was joking about it. And how long had it been since Zhang Feng had mentioned it? Who would take it seriously? Besides, wasn't that a joke? If this thing could really be set up from the ground and made the water flow from the bottom to the top, would they still be here? Furthermore, this thing, damn it. How could this be done by a human? Li Shimin was also confused. They all stared at Zhang Feng, wanting to see what tricks he was going to play. Seeing Li Chengqian and Du go like this, Zhang Feng said, "During this period of time, you guys have learned about physics and air and water resistance, right?" Li Chengqian did not know what Zhang Feng wanted to ask, so he nodded subconsciously and said, "Almost. Then I'll rely on you guys. How does water move?" "It moves according to the natural laws of gravity and geology." "What's water pressure?" "Water pressure is, what's atmospheric pressure?" Zhang Feng interrogated them carefully. Li Chengqian and Du Go could answer fluently, which made Du Ruhui and Li Shimin very excited. They stroked their beards and nodded calmly. It was as if this was how it was. After Zhang Feng interrogated them, he asked, "Since you guys have understood this principle, I'll give you a task now. Bring water from the lake to all the villas and complete this project within 10 days. How about it?" "The water I'm talking about is to pass through the second-floor balcony of the villas, and then the water will have to return to the lake. Are you confident?" This, Li Chengqian and Du Go were sweating profusely. If you were talking about ordinary water diversion, you could just dig a canal and complete it in less than 10 days. But you want to pass through the second-floor balcony of the villas? The two of them subconsciously looked at the second floor of the villa opposite the window. Then, they looked at Hu in the distance and were stunned. Although this seemed simple, it was more difficult than passing water to the workshop. Li Chengqian said with a sobbing tone, "Fengzi, why don't we go and connect the water to the workshop? This is too difficult. Think about it, although the lake is high up, this villa area is at least 10 feet above the lake. How can this work?" Zhang Feng ignored Li Chengqian's complaints and said, "Oh right, I forgot one thing. That is, from the lake to here, you are not allowed to dig a canal on the ground. Moreover, you have to bring a separate canal to the academy's dormitory area. The time limit is still 10 days. If you can complete the test, I'll give each of you a composite bow." "I can't do it. This is not something a human can do." Li Chengqian and Du Go could not help but complain. Li Shimin coughed and said with a cold voice, "These are the things you learned in the mountains during this period of time? This is also my test. If you can complete what Fengzi said within 10 days, get lost to Longyu Road." Chapter 1423. Li Shimin didn't understand what Zhang Feng was going to do at first. Sometimes, it was to draw water to the workshop. Sometimes, it was to ask them about aerodynamics, hydrodynamics, and so on. Although he didn't understand these things, he always felt that it seemed to be something very awesome. And Li Shimin was quite satisfied with Li Chengqian's answer just now. This was his son. This was what the crown prince of the Tang dynasty should have. But when Zhang Feng asked them to take action, they were stumped. What was the difference between this and an embroidered pillow? This was what made Li Shimin angry the most. As long as you guys put in a little more effort, how is this thing difficult? How was it difficult? You understood the things in the book, but you still didn't know how to tinker with that thing. What was the difference between this and an armchair strategist? After all this time, this finally happened. How could Li Shimin not be angry? Chen Yaojin and the others also looked at Li Chengqian with smiles, but when they saw Li Shimin looking over, they hurriedly put on a straight face and said in a serious voice, "This is a good thing. Although I don't know what this thing is, once it is made, it will definitely be a good thing that will leave a mark in history. Think about it, since ancient times, who can make water flow from a low place to a high place? So, just now, I was thinking that since Fengzi asked you to do it, you must have a certain degree of confidence. Didn't you just say that this thing doesn't seem to be difficult for you? Don't make your father uncomfortable. The sooner you make this thing, the sooner the phosphate fertilizer factory can start working. This is all money." Yes, Old Hay is right. Qian, do you still remember what you said to me when you came to Fengzi? Li Shimin also gave advice. In an instant, Du Ruhui, Wei Jing, and the others also gave advice to Li Chengqian and Li Chengqian. Their meaning was clear. They had to do this thing whether they wanted to or not. Moreover, from the few words spoken by these people, the meaning that flowed out was already very clear. At a time like this thing is a lifesaver. Once it's produced, it will benefit everyone. In any case, the entire Great Tang will be yours. If you create this wonderful thing that benefits both the country and the people, your prestige in the court will soar. Once you ascend to the throne in the future, you'll be able to do so. That would be a lot of benefits. Anyway, to put it bluntly, even if you want to go, you still have to go. Everyone said so, and Zhang Feng, who deserved a beating, didn't say anything. He just looked at them with a smile. What could he say? Li Chengqian could only cup his fists and clench his teeth as he said, "Then, this student will go and prepare now." As they spoke, Li Chengqian and Du Go hurriedly slipped away. If they stayed any longer, they would be driven mad. Although they also knew that this thing was definitely related to the phosphate mine on Longsho Mountain, how could such a thing be produced? Wasn't this a fantasy? Once they went out, the two of them looked listlessly at the lake under the waterfall in the distance, and couldn't help but sigh again. "Debing, do you think this thing is King Feng Zi, that bastard, tricking us?" Du Go looked behind him. After seeing that there was no one, he said bitterly, "I suspect that this is a trap set by them. How could they do this?" "I have something to say." At this time, a timid voice sounded weakly behind them. The two of them were so scared that they trembled. Turning his head to look, he saw the kid that Zhang Feng brought back squatting at the corner of the wall, weaving straw sandals. Beside him was a fat goat licking his straw sandals. Moreover, it had even bitten a hole in it. This person was Qian Wanli's silly younger brother. He was picked up by Zhang Feng. He was very quiet, as if he didn't exist. At this time, seeing him speak, Li Chengqian waved his hand impatiently and didn't intend to pay attention to him. At this time, Xianxia said, "Actually, water can flow upwards. I remember that on the Longsho Canal in Chang and City, there's a big water wheel. What do you know? What does that thing have to do with this?" Li Chengqian's voice couldn't be lowered. He was already upset. Previously, when Zhang Feng arranged that kind of training, he was already unhappy. He also wanted to go. But Zhang Feng arranged for him to do this troublesome experiment. All he had to do was deal with these bottles and cans. How could it be as cool as brandishing a knife and wielding a gun? And the conversation between Li Chengqian and Xianxia was clearly heard by the few people in the living room. At this time, seeing Li Chengqian speak, Zhang Feng was a little surprised by Xianxia's behavior, but he still couldn't help but walk out of the room. He squatted beside Xianxia and asked, "How did you know?" "I heard about it. And I also heard that there are Marines. When people were in Tongzhou, they saw this thing in the farmland. When you mentioned it just now, I guessed it." Zhang Feng patted Xianxia's shoulder, then looked at the listless Li Chengqian and Qian Wanli. He said with a smile, "Li Chengqian, I order you now as the dean. In these 10 days, listen to Xianxia's opinion on everything related to this thing. And from now on, he's your brother. Within a month, teach him how to read and teach him the basic knowledge related to physics. Once you do that, I'll agree to one of your requests." Also, Zhang Feng smiled and said, "Xianxia has already told you the answer. That's right, the thing I'm talking about is actually linked to the water wheel. Think about it carefully. 10 days is plenty of time." Li Chengqian smacked his lips. He looked at Xianxia, then looked at Zhang Feng, who had entered the room. He suddenly felt like crying. Chapter 1424. Li Chengqian wanted to cry. Looking at Xianxia, who was squatting in the corner, he felt like he was in Tesco. "I am the crown prince, okay? I am Li Chengqian, the current crown prince. You want me to learn from a fool? Learn what?" "Sigh." Li Chengqian slapped his eyes, took a deep breath, and waved his hand. "Debingo. Invite your junior brother back to our villa." After Li Chengqian and the other two left, in the room, Wei Zheng and the others looked at Zhang Feng strangely. Then, they looked at Li Shimin, who looked a little unhappy, and did not dare to say anything. Let the current crown prince communicate with a fool. This is probably the first time in history that such a weirdo has happened, right? Even storytellers would not dare to say this. Li Shimin was a little embarrassed. Looking at Zhang Feng, who was in a daze while making the customized map, he asked, Fengzi, I know that you have been a little upset recently because of that Qian Wanli, but you don't have to push his younger brother away like this, right? If you think it's okay, I'll go find someone and let him live a rich life. How about that? Zhang Feng looked at Li Shimin and said with a faint smile, if you don't want your family to fall, then you can choose this. Do you think that I, Zhang Feng, am blind? That I can bring anyone to the mountain? Li Shimin and the other dukes' faces suddenly changed. Zhang Feng's words were simply disrespectful. Li Shimin asked, what do you mean by this? Zhang Feng put the map into his pocket. It was obvious that he had no intention of returning it to Li Shimin. He said, Xianxia, I have a feeling that in less than 10 years, the entire Tang dynasty, at least in the business world, will not be able to stand shoulder to shoulder with him. What's the point of having a family name? When that time comes, we won't even be able to see his back. That's why I brought him up the mountain. Li Gan and the others aren't interested in the business world, so it's understandable that you want Li Gan to take over your legacy. But have you ever thought that you're handing over such a big business to someone they don't like? Even if I'm there to support it in the future, what if I go somewhere else when the time comes? What will happen to him? Li Shimin's eyes narrowed. He looked at the door and asked, so you're saying that this kid is a prodigy in the business world? Zhang Feng nodded his head. Unique. Li Shimin was shocked. This was the first time he had received such praise from Zhang Feng. He had indeed seen Zhang Feng praise people before, but he had never seen Zhang Feng praise a person as a unique existence. Even Qian Wanli had not received such high praise. When he thought of Xianxia's silly look, Li Shimin could not help but go crazy. How could such a person be considered a business genius? That was simply the injustice of the heavens. Zhang Feng also saw the confusion on Li Shimin and the others' faces. He smiled and said, don't be fooled by his appearance. Although this kid looks a little foolish, this kind of person is the most terrifying. Previously, when I was in the Chen family, I also inadvertently discovered his talent in business. Perhaps this is the reason why people who don't walk the same path will not enter the same house? This kid wasn't born properly. He's an illegitimate child. However, he learned from his mother that his father is a businessman. If he wants to return home, he must be recognized. Moreover, his mother's life is actually quite miserable. Moreover, this kid was born with some brain problems in the eyes of others. So naturally, he would be forgotten by the Qian family. In addition, this kid was stimulated by the death of his mother in his early years. This is even more incredible. But as the saying goes, when God closes a door for you, he will open a window for you. This kid is like this. Although he is a little silly, but in the business world, it can be said that you, Lao Li, will be hung up and beaten if you were to ask him now. Although Li Shimin was not a real businessman, he also planned to firmly grasp the business power in his hands. Was this kid really as terrifying as Zhang Feng said? If this was the case. There was one thing that Zhang Feng did not say, but everyone understood. That was this kid was a little silly. This was the easiest to control. Once he recognized a person, it was almost impossible for a second person to walk into his heart in this lifetime. This was also a point that Li Shimin slightly realized after studying Zhang Feng's psychological book and adding this time. At this time, Li Shimin was really looking forward to it. After 10 days, would it give him a surprise? If so, then in the future. Chapter 1425. Li Chengqian and Du Go spent a lot of effort to convince Qian Guang and invite him into the villa. This kid was stubborn. Other than Zhang Feng, he didn't believe anyone else. However, Zhang Feng had given them a strict order. They had no choice but to invite Qian Guang into the villa as if he was their ancestor. Inside the villa, Cheng Chumo and the others were really excitedly discussing the training this time. They were even shirtless. The entire living room was foggy, mixed with the smell of sweat, that feeling. It felt good. However, when they saw Li Chengqian and Du Go bring Qian Guang in with a gloomy face, they couldn't help but instantly quiet down. Cheng Chumo also hurriedly put on his clothes and asked, I say, didn't you guys go to see Fengzi? What's the situation? Du Go pointed at Qian Guang and said, do you still remember the time when Fengzi asked us to get water for the workshop? Who didn't remember this? Everyone remembered? However, it had been a long time and they had forgotten. Now that Dugo said this, they suddenly remembered. Cheng Chumo widened his eyes in surprise and asked, "What? Fengzi, do you still remember this?" Dugo looked at Li Qingxian's gloomy face and hurriedly called the timid Qian Guang to the side. He let him sit in the corner and eat snacks. Then he said, "Yes." However, this time, he asked us to connect all the water in the villa area and the school dormitory area from the lake. When Cheng Chumo heard this, he didn't have much reaction. He nodded and said, "This is very simple. Tomorrow, I'll find a few people to dig a canal. Isn't that enough? You're so worried just because of this? Simple?" Dugo was speechless as he stared at Cheng Chumo. Cheng Chumo sniffed and said, "Isn't that simple? If it's so simple, would he still be Fengzi?" Li Qingxian sighed and said, "What he means is that we're not allowed to dig enough canals. Within 10 days, we have to connect the water in the lake to the second-floor balconies of all the villas. Then, we have to go around the dormitory area and return to the lake." Hearing this, in an instant, everyone exploded. Bad day? Crazy? F***ck. Instantly, Cheng Chumo and the others were dumbfounded. Mother f***ker, are they crazy? How could he possibly succeed in this matter? Wasn't this intentional? Wei Shuyu pointed at the string of money and said, "Then what does this kid do?" Dugo sighed and said, "When we went out, this kid said something about using the water wheel. Fengzi came out and told us to bring him along." Water wheel? In an instant, everyone was stunned. They had seen a lot of water wheels. And he thought of many things in an instant. But at this time, using the principle of the water wheel to bring water to the villa? Or the second floor? Everyone couldn't help but glance at the top floor of the villa. It should be at least 10 feet tall, right? Although the lake was higher than the villa, the height of the villa, how could the water be directed to the second floor of the villa? And on the second floor of all the villas? A water wheel was indeed possible, but how big would it have to be to do that? This was simply impossible to accomplish. They couldn't help but look at Xianxia, who was hiding aside and eating snacks while secretly sizing them up. Wei Shuyu slowly walked forward, squatted beside Xianxia and asked, "Just now you said that it can be done with a water wheel?" Xianxia instinctively shrank back, glanced at Wei Shuyu, and then looked at Cheng Chumo in fear, and stammered timidly, "Well, it can be done, and it only needs 2 water wheels and some water troughs." Water troughs? 2 water wheels? Could this work? In an instant, Li Qingxian's face changed. So did everyone else. They really learned a lot of basic physics knowledge such as aerodynamics and hydrodynamics, and they knew many of them like the back of their hand. The most important thing was that they all knew about water wheels. They all had such things in their houses. But at this time, thinking of this, in an instant, everyone was suddenly enlightened. Li Qingxian looked at Xianxia in shock and asked, "Xiang, tell me honestly, Fengzi told you all this in advance, right?" Xianxia was trembling from Li Qingxian's expression and aura at this time. She shivered behind the chair and said, Brother didn't tell me. This is all my guess. Don't blame brother." Buzz. Li Qingxian's head exploded. At this time, thinking of what Zhang Feng said at the door and his expression when he said it, and then looking at what Xianxia said now, Li Qingxian had an illusion that he had lived for nothing. Obviously, he was the one who studied the hardest. But in the end, why couldn't he think of such a simple thing? In the end, it was a little kid who didn't know anything to explain to him? And this kid had some problems with his head. Li Qingxian's face was a little ugly. He looked up, but saw Wei Shuyu, Du Go and the others' constipated expressions. He couldn't help but take a deep breath. "Dabing, tell me, we've been on the mountain for so long, why do I seriously suspect that we've just arrived?" Chapter 1426. Actually, not to mention Li Qingxian and Du Go, although everyone had just seen a little bit of Qianxian, they could feel how terrifying he was. This guy. He was simply a pervert. If it was before, Li Qingxian, Du Go, and everyone else really thought that this was an impossible task. But now, with this kid's words, Everyone instantly felt that there was a slight possibility this time. It could be done. 2 water wheels, plus a series of water troughs, using the principles of water circulation and dynamics, this could really be done. And they thought of more than one problem. But the problem was filling the mountain with water at this time. This seemed. Chengchumo looked at the door cautiously and said, "Li Qingqian, is there a problem here, Fengzi?" As he spoke, Chengchumo pointed at his head and whispered again, "If there's no problem, what kind of water are they filling the mountain with at this time? And most importantly, isn't it a little superfluous to do this at this time?" Li Qingqian rolled his eyes and said, "You don't know this, but the phosphate fertilizer factory on Mount Longsho has no water source. I reckon we'll have to make a trip to Mount Longsho when the time comes. This water trough, to put it bluntly, is a test. If we can complete it this time, then there's no problem. If we can't, not to mention Fengzi, even my father will skin us alive." Speaking of this, everyone was even more worried. Especially Chengchumo. Although he seemed very excited from Yuchi Baolin's words just now, he vaguely felt that this perverted military training seemed to make him a little apprehensive. This thing was still the simplest, but that bastard Zhang Feng actually said that this was still the simplest, that they still had to train their resistance to beatings, endurance, and so on. At first, everyone thought that this was a joke. But now, after Li Qingqian confirmed the water trough, Chengchumo instantly felt that the end had come. What the hell? This was not something that humans could do. Resistance, hunger tolerance, reflexes, from their point of view, wasn't this just taking a beating without fighting back? Furthermore, after taking a beating, he wouldn't be able to eat and would continue on like this? Thinking of this, Chengchumo couldn't help but want to hug Wei Shuyu and cry for a while, but Wei Shuyu slapped him to do Go's side. Li Qingqian ignored the grumbling Chengchumo and said enviously, "Why don't we switch?" Hearing this, Chengchumo was instantly energized. He asked excitedly, "Are you serious?" Li Qingqian nodded. "I'm serious." Seeing this, Chengchumo immediately shook his head like a rattledrum and said, "Then I won't trade." Li Qingqian was so angry that he wanted to beat someone up. "Damn you, are you looking for a beating?" Seeing this, Fang Yai hurriedly tried to smooth things over. "Now is not the time to talk about this. Let's think about what to do next. I just heard that Fengzi plans to use Li Qingqian's stubborn identity in Chang, and as well as the identity of those hooligans to stir up trouble. Why do I feel that Fengzi seems to want to do something big?" Hearing this, only then did everyone's expression change. Every one of them basically had some lackeys in Chang. These people had nothing to do. They usually did whatever they wanted to do. However, almost every month, they had to take money to bribe them. The purpose was to find out some secrets for them. At first, it was to help them find some fun and interesting things, such as something good coming out of Yanlai restaurant today, or Dongying people coming to Chang and Shi City, or barbarians peddling women in revealing clothes and so on. These were all the initial models. After the identities of the 4 great demon kings were confirmed, the stubborn world was also officially confirmed. At this time, the intelligence network of Li Qingqian and the others was basically completed. Li Qingqian knew that it was impossible for Li Shimin not to know about his stubborn identity in Chang and City. The reason why he didn't say it was actually intentional. He also needed some information, and the identities of the 4 great demon kings seemed to be confusing. At least it could give those who knew them the illusion that the emperor didn't know about it, and the dukes were indulging in it. In this way, their careful thoughts would be active. And this was their best person to gather information. However, they didn't know how Zhang Feng knew about it. Could it be that he found clues from the matter of paper and the bone-strengthening powder? But it didn't matter. The most important thing at this time was, when would they be able to have a real fight? They couldn't wait to directly rush into the homes of the 5 families and 7 clans and directly wipe them out. Wouldn't it be better? Why did they have to talk in circles here? Li Qingqian nodded and said, "Just now at Fengzi's place, I heard Fengzi's conversation with father and the others. It seems that Fengzi is indeed going to do something big. The most important thing is our bomb. Once we find out who is behind it, we will use the bomb I made to kill them. It's that simple."